Alrighty, we've got a couple things to discuss, but first I'm going to make a video, so let me set that up. Alright, first thing we're going to be doing today is actually looking at some interesting, weird stuff here. I'll be going into the video, but I'm just trying to set it up right now. Alright, let's set it up. That's pretty good. Sounds okay, I hope. Pretty good, pretty good, pretty good. Alright. Alright, I'd like you to do a little bit of an experiment. Go to your favorite content creator. Then check if any of this stuff's happening. Now, here's the thing. One of these, the one on the right, is normal. This is YouTube when I am signed in. This right here. This is YouTube when I am signed in normally on unrestricted mode. Now, if I go into restricted mode, if I were to go in to restricted mode via clicking on this thing over here, we go to settings, we turn on restricted mode. All right, turn on restricted mode. And then what happens? Some of your videos disappear. Go to your favorite content creator and see if this is happening. Because look at this. I mean, I've got something around, I don't know, half of the videos that I've made, something around there, are just gone. You can't see them if they're on restricted mode. Now, I was not the first person to discover this, and obviously it's not affecting me as much as it is some other people. Some other people, all of their videos are gone if you go on restricted mode. Not good. Very bad. But one thing that I can say for sure is that I don't understand in any way, shape, or form the criteria that they are using to take videos off. Okay? Now, some of these videos, like every single one of these Gary's Economics videos, this one, this one, this one, this one, they're all gone. As you can see, they are not there. I don't know why that would be being suppressed. First, I thought, well, maybe it's because I'm playing videos. I'm playing some other videos here. That's true, but I'm also playing videos on this, debt economy issue. That one shows up. That one's fine. I was playing, let's see what else. Yeah, I mean, like a couple of the other ones, I played a couple videos in these, like fairly long form, playing in the background, something like that. And they were all good. If anything, I would have thought for sure this Destiny video would have gotten kicked off, demonetized or again restricted in some way, shape, or form, because this is a really super serious subject matter. I thought for sure, if any one of them would have gotten kicked, it would have been that one. But unfortunately, that's not the case. What's happening is that through whatever weird set of, AI algorithm updates that YouTube has put out recently, and this basically started to happen, I don't know, like a week or two ago, it's affecting a lot of content creators, especially people that are uploading in a manner that is very super like consistent, like every day or something like that, which is why for me, you'll see, a video every other day instead of every day for the next little while until we can figure this out, until YouTube updates this. Basically, I'm going to try to be posting like someone who's not making AI slop and just, posting, churning out videos again and again and again and again and again every day, all day. I'm going to get away from that to see if that can in any way, shape, or form affect my ranking in the algorithm. I'm also going to be doing some stuff where I'm not posting and publishing to subscribers. I'm going to basically just be trying to push them out and see if they organically gain traction. Those videos seem to do okay. Those are all of those Gary's Economics videos that I've been doing lately. I have not published to subscribers, and they've gotten some traction. So I'm not sure what exactly it is about the YouTube algorithm, what these changes are. My guess is they're trying to, derank, devalue AI content, which makes sense to me because everyone hates it. I hate it. I don't like it. I don't like when I get tricked into clicking on that stuff. But unfortunately, the criteria that they're using to make these decisions is, it's going to hit a lot of people that are just actually trying to, work hard on YouTube. And it does mean that, if YouTube is your career, if YouTube is something that you're doing, on a daily basis to try to put food on the table, you are getting really actually hurt, because a lot of the views for these videos, not really for me because I'm in a weird spot, but for other people, they're going down like, 75%. They're losing 75, 80% of the normal average amount of views that a video would get. And it's very weird. It's very concerning. And obviously, it's really only going to affect the people that are actually, working hard, trying to do this stuff, that are making daily videos. And, that's kind of the people that are going to get hit hardest with this. Because the AI people, if they lose their side hustle, they lose their side hustle. No big deal. And to be honest, I don't think you should be de-ranking those things. I think we should probably do is like demonetizing them, making it so that they can't be, making money off the AI slop stuff. They'll stop making those videos and, they do your job for you. That would be my advice. YouTube, if you're listening, that would be my advice. But until that happens, we're going to try to see what happens with this, full YouTube video situation. My guess is they're not really targeting any people specifically for like bad political opinions or anything like that. It could be the case, but I think I'm like a small enough creator and my library is like varied enough and weird enough that they have no idea where to put me, what box to slot me in, and therefore I don't think I'm being targeted because I have like untoward political opinions or anything like that. I think it's just because I'm, posting every day, and the videos that I'm making, I don't know, I guess somehow read some, AI algorithm that I'm making AI stuff, which is really weird because obviously this is me. AI is not that good yet. So I'm not sure. We will see what happens in the future. With that being said, good luck in all your endeavors. Do look into this. I'm curious, and let me know in the comments if any of your other, favorite content creators are getting their videos kicked off the internet. Thank you very much for your time and attention. I'll say farewell for now. All right. That's that. Delightful. All right, I've got one other one. Bloop. Okie dokie. And let me put my face back up. Boop, there it is. Delightful. Okay, so I've got this guy, Marco, what's his name? Money and Marco. Money and, is this Macro? Money and Macro. I always say Marco. It's not Marco though, it's Macro. Okay, I'm going to hit record on this as well. This will be tomorrow's video. And we're going to try to find old Gary's economics here. Where is he at? There he is. Back a little bit more.
Most economists and most people use today.
Listen. All right. Money and Macro talking about Gary Stevenson from Gary's Economics. I do want to see this reaction. It'll be a quick little video, and I'll be giving you my thoughts as they come up. And I think this guy, Macro, I'll be totally honest, or possibly Marco, I'm not really sure of his name. That guy, I like him a little bit more. He shows data, he shows charts. I don't see as much of that from Gary Stevenson. I've not watched his entire library of content. 100% completely fair. If he is, and every video that I've seen from him is just a weird outlier where he uses no numbers, totally possible. But I think this guy's a little bit better.
The last 70 years are not normal, Stephen. The last 70 years are not normal. The last 70 years in Europe and the US, where ordinary people like my dad could work for the post office on less than average wage and buy a house and support a family, it's not normal. It's not normal in the world, and it's not normal in history. Most countries in the world are not like that. Most countries have a small super rich elite and a very large group of extremely poor people. That's most of the country.
It's most of the country, it's most of the thing. And again, these are points that I brought up in his previous video where he was talking about economic collapse. And I think he does kind of miss the point here because he views history and economics in an odd way that's really kind of ahistorical. It's kind of true now, but he'll use this as a broad historical model, which is just not the case. Broadly, historically speaking, there were two groups. He says there's four. He's like, all right, there's a working class, there's a middle class, there's the government, and then there's the rich. That's not the case. Historically speaking, there was a working class, your peasants, your serfs, even the people that were like, skilled laborers and these types of things, your merchants. The majority of these people were all essentially working class, because then you had the second class, which was the state slash the aristocracy slash the rich. They were all the same thing. You got rich by being a noble landed gentry. And that was how you had your wealth, is because you had all of these peasants working under you. And I understand how that's informed an enormous amount of sort of economic perspective from a lot of these places. The UK specifically, but I mean, realistically, you could say easily all of Europe. You can point to China. You can point to pretty much anywhere where communism really took off. Russia, the Soviet Union. All of these places had, an aristocracy that was the government, and therefore it had a monopoly on force. And they were therefore using that monopoly on force to extract all the wealth from the people underneath them. They essentially had, a peasant class, a serf class, a slave class. That was, we might term the working class. And that is where a lot of this, real legitimate animosity towards people that are wealthy, that are rich, comes from in most of these countries. And I totally understand it. I do totally understand it. However, it's not the reality of today. Today, the majority of people that are rich in the UK, and just mostly, I would say all over the world in general, made their money. They made their money themselves, or possibly like their parents, like they're one generation removed from the founder of the business. And the reasons for that are multitudinous. First off, basically, if you have an enormous cache of money and wealth in the UK, if you die, half of that is gone. Half of that goes to the government. Like, I think it's 40%, might be more than that, and it depends on how it's structured and stuff. But a huge amount of your money just goes away when you die. Your kids don't see that. And, I mean, that seems wildly unfair to me. But, for someone who's, I don't know, less well off and isn't getting hit by that, well, they don't care. Right? If I, work and I'm successful and I'm like, hey, I'm doing this. Why? Because I want, cars and that kind of stuff. It's like, no, that stuff's empty and meaningless to me. I'm doing this because I want, my kids to be provided for. I want them to have, a nice safety net. I want them to have a comfortable life. I want them to have a secure financial future. If the state just comes in and goes, no, we're taking that. That's ours. I'm like, well, I'm dead, so I can't do anything about it. But I'm pissed leading up to it. Absolutely. Now, the Gary's economics idea of, the last 70 years are not normal in history, that's true. But I don't think he goes far enough into this. I don't think he delves into the historical realities of this stuff enough. He just kind of focuses on, a little piece of it to push his message, which again is obviously resonating with a lot of people.
Country, and it's most of history in this country, and it's most of history in the US. We talk about Charles Dickens. I read Hard Times, and this is written in the 19th century when Britain was like the industrial superpower of the whole world. And at the time, the government was talking about, should we tax these industrialists? And the industrialists were saying, if you tax us, we'll throw our factories into the sea. And it just...
And I understand that. I really do understand that sentiment of, you are going to put a gun to my head and say, your money that you earned, you worked, you sweated, you know exactly the amount of pain, heartache, suffering, blood, sweat, and tears that went into making this. You're not owed that. We're going to take that. We're robbing you legally via taxes of this kind of stuff. That is, yeah, I would absolutely be like, yeah, no, like, come and take it from me. Bring guns. Make it for real, okay? Don't send some IRS auditor. Make this real. come in with guns and take my property from me. All right. I want everyone to know that you are doing what you're actually doing. All right. And then when you get here, before you do it, I'm going to set it on fire. All right. You go to hell. You did not earn this. You did not make this. I made the world a better place by making a product that people want. You can't have it. I'll burn it to the ground. I admire that. I respect that attitude towards it. Yeah, no, you didn't earn this. This isn't yours. You go to hell. Mm-hmm.
Reminds me, you know.
Okay, I'm just gonna stop it in the middle. I think he's right, you know, in the sense that he's saying, look, the past 70 years or something is not a normal period economically speaking, and I think that's true. Actually, the period from the 1950s to the 1970s specifically is known as the golden age of capitalism in the...
And I will say, I don't think he goes into this. They usually don't. But the reason why this was such a strange era in history in the West in general, the US, the UK, and the amount of sort of like, wealth disparity shrinks enormously. The reason for that is because so many people died in World War II. You know, that's literally what happened. Is like, there's fewer people to eat into, the pie of like, finite resources like land and these types of things. It's like, yeah, a lot of people died, and therefore there's more to go around, and therefore the wealth divide shrinks. And that's just what happens. That seems very completely apparent and obvious to me, but I just don't see people talking about it. Does that make any sense?
The West, at least, there was a huge economic growth and then inequality actually went down. Now, that is something you just don't see that much, and I think gave a lot of hope to many people.
Yeah, and again, I'm like, you don't see it that often, I don't think, because, historically speaking, if that were to happen, a lot of people were to die, you would just create new nobility. You go, okay, this house got wiped out. All right, well, that's fine. We're going to have a knight, who did well in the war. I'm going to elevate him to be, the new Baron of, Lancaster or whatever. And therefore, they get all the land. And, there's no division of wealth because it's just, you're just installing a new person to oversee the same amount of land. And, therefore, the wealth divide is not going to shrink. So it's kind of the first time in history of maybe then World War I where you had a lot of other stuff going on, but where you had, a bunch of people die, and therefore, there's a lot more to go around, and ordinary people have the ability to get it because of the rise of sort of, capitalism, free market economics, and the fact that you have now, a working class, you have a middle class, you have a merchant class, you have, all of these different freedoms and ideas that are running around and allowing people to accrue wealth if they're not, born into it.
And now that's just not there anymore. We've seen economic growth, but especially in the United States and the United Kingdom, and where Gary's from, it's been very unequal, increasingly also in Europe.
And I will say here, this basically is just, look, we're back to essentially, a historical norm. It's this weird spot right here. This, it doesn't go back super far, but it's like you can easily see that this stuff, obviously, I think this only goes up to 2010. My guess is the disparity jumps a little bit more after 2020 because of COVID and that kind of stuff, which again, I blame on the government. I don't blame that on rich people. But essentially, like, yeah, you're kind of like returning to a historical norm. And that makes sense. You had a blip, you had a, 20-year period wherein which, an enormous amount of people in a certain generation die, are not there anymore, and therefore cannot claim or, fight for a piece of the finite wealth pie. And therefore, you have a period where, yeah, they've got a lot of stuff. They can do a lot of stuff with that. They can accrue a lot of assets that are, again, finite very easily because there's less competition for them. But then, they have a lot of kids. There's a baby boom. And then what happens? Well, okay, you return to the historical norm.
And yeah, it's true that this is going back to sort of a historical norm
Mm-hmm.
in the Industrial Revolution in the United Kingdom. It was super unequal. The United States development in the early 20th century, late 19th century was super unequal. You had these oligarch classes. This, of course, is also the case in China today, it's the case in India today.
Mm-hmm.
In almost all emerging market economies, it's the case.
The only time we've ever really been able to provide decent living conditions for ordinary working
Okay, and again, I do just want to just touch on this a little bit. What is decent living conditions? Decent living, if by decent living conditions you mean you're comfortable, you mean, you've got, you've got a place to live that's comfortable to live in, that is, that has some amount of luxuries, that has some amount of luxury goods, whether that's, TV, computer, all of these things that are straight up magic, like past, 20 years ago, these things were literally like unaffordable luxuries for the super elite. And going 50 years back, they were straight up sorcery. All right. Like if you had something like this, you would be burned at the stake for being a witch because this is magic. You have a brick that has all the information that's ever existed in human history at your fingertips. Yeah, that's literal witchcraft. You must be a spawn of the devil. All right. Like it's the only possible way you could get something like this. Now everybody's got it, and it's no big deal. My guess is comfortable living conditions is very, very different from accruing wealth. Because you can accrue wealth and have horrible living conditions. In fact, it helps. It helps. If you have really uncomfortable living conditions, you can save more money and therefore accrue more wealth. So what do you want? Most people, to be perfectly honest, they're very happy if they can literally just be like, yeah, I have a comfortable existence. I'm content in my day-to-day life, and that's it. And that's how people spend. That's how people spend. However much money you make, that's how much you're planning to spend. And then you'd go, all right, well, I want to not work for my entire life. So how much money do I need to save so that the last, 20, 30 years of my life where I'm not going to be working, I can just, spend that amount of money savings. That's how the vast majority of people, that's how pretty much everybody lives in terms of financially. Yeah, that's how they all live.
people was the period after the war where we massively redistributed wealth. And now we're losing that holding of wealth of the middle class.
Can you acknowledge, though, that that was a completely different time as it relates to being
And this is a good point.
able to...
It was a different time, but, I could,
Because of technology.
Nigeria today, Brazil today, the UK 300 years ago, France 200 years ago. There is only one specific time that we have ever successfully provided broad living standards for ordinary people, and it was a period of time where we protected a broadly equal wealth distribution.
And tax the rich at very high rates is what he's going to say. Now, that is one thing that happened during that period of time, is that, you tax the rich at very high rates. Yeah, that happened. That happened. However, we can also say that, you tax the rich at very high rates. If wealth distribution is less unequal, that also means that they probably weren't paying as much in taxes. And again, I think they're going to go into this, but the reasons why they could tax them at these high rates is not there anymore. It's not possible. And again, this is also, it's oversimplifying things, because it's entirely possible that the fact that, the rich were taxed at very high rates had super small effect on the amount of, wealth redistribution. It's entirely possible. So, I mean, again, like I have another explanation for why the wealth distribution was more equal after the war. It's because, there were less people around fighting for those resources. I mean, that's just as reasonable as going, okay, it's because of taxes. Like, I think mine's actually a little bit fundamentally easier to understand.
and tax the rich at very high rates.
Okay, technologically speaking, it's much easier today to move money across the world
This is true.
than it was in the golden age of capitalism. And that is true. Yes, you had super high taxes in the United States, United Kingdom, for top earners in that time period. But that's not the only thing that defined or made the golden age of capitalism very different than most other times. Because in this time you had huge or super stringent capital controls, meaning you could not move money across borders that easily. And today you can, and also in the time period that Gary mentions with the rubber bands and
this is also a time of like way less globalization. You know, if you were, you know, a rich industrialist or a rich, you know, robber baron, whatever, in the UK or the US or something like that, essentially all of your business was done in the US. You know, as it is right now, that's almost never the case. If you are a super rich person, you've probably got businesses in multiple different countries. You have like a transnational corporation. And therefore, you know, you're just always shopping around for the best deal. And you're not only, you know, in terms of, you know, your own tax rates, but in terms of, you know, the taxes of how everything is going to be set up, where you're putting your factories, where you're putting your businesses, where your employees are working, all of those types of things. You're shopping around for that. And yeah, it's much easier to move it around now.
the United States, with these oligarchs in the United Kingdom, money could move across borders super easily. This was a time of hyper globalization back then, and it is today again as well. And this is really the problem with the high taxes, with super high taxes. We are seeing it now in the United Kingdom, that a lot of millionaires or very rich people are leaving the United
Yeah, it's basically, I think they have per capita lost the most amount of millionaires out of everybody. So, I mean, again, we've got another video that we're going to be looking at later, but something along the lines of, let's say the top 1% of people earn about 14% of all the revenue in the UK. They pay 30% of the taxes. Okay, well, guess what? If you're losing more of those people, you're losing how much more of, the tax base. How much of the services that you want to provide are now going to be completely unaffordable because you've kicked out, you've made it unappealing to live in the UK to a couple, millionaires. And again, the majority of those people that are rich, not even necessarily super rich, but just millionaires, are absolutely just, people that have made it themselves. I mean, it's not unheard of in the US to be like, I've got like a successful plumbing business. I'm a millionaire. I'm a successful contractor. I'm a millionaire. It's not hundreds of millions of dollars or anything like that, but yeah, like you're a millionaire. Okay. Is that insane to be like, yeah, you know what? I don't want to be taxed to the point where I can't run my business anymore. I'd rather go somewhere else.
Kingdom. We have seen it, I think, in Norway as well, that they were increasing taxes there, and then just a lot of the people that were supposed to pay those taxes left to Switzerland in the case of Norway. And the problem is that you can easily do business across borders, so you can just keep your business in Norway and live in Switzerland and pay most of your taxes in Switzerland, which are much lower than in Norway. So I think what Gary says is mostly correct, but the host is also making a good point. There is a reason why we don't have those higher taxes at the moment today. And you can say, look, that's morally unacceptable. Absolutely, that's a political point, but there is a reason it's more difficult to do that today, and that is the mobility of capital today is just so much higher that people can easily move somewhere, or just have the money move somewhere else, such that they pay lower taxes today.
Yeah, and I mean, this is my point, which is, if the solution to your problem, wealth inequality, and wealth inequality is going to necessarily lead to some economic collapse, if your solution to it is just pragmatically, practically impossible, we want to tax the super rich. Okay? How are we going to get them to do that? Are you gonna like lock them down and just liquidate all of their wealth? And they can't move it. They can't move it around. They can't do any of this kind of stuff. Okay, great. Let's say that you do that. Again, what does that actually accomplish? In terms of like short-term stuff, yeah, you get a little bit of a bump, but it's like almost nothing. And then those people, you can't, hit them again for all of their wealth, it's gone. You've sucked it all dry. And all the people that you weren't able to grab in your initial lockdown are gone. They're like, no, we're leaving. We're not taking any of this stuff. I don't think it's a reasonable proposal if the possibility of it succeeding is almost nil, and you're utilizing all of this attention, resource, capital to, grab up all these people. You're wasting everybody's time. If the solution you're proposing is totally impractical and almost certainly not going to work, and, it's just completely unfit for the current situation, you're wasting everybody's time for this, just completely flippant reason of I'd like to do this thing. That's great, man. I love that you want to do that, but if that's your policy proposal, it needs to have some possibility of success. Otherwise, you're just grifting. You're just trying to make, a name for yourself.
That's a problem. So my producers told me that in the UK there's this initiative that Gary supports, Tax the Super Rich, and it does take into account that people should continue to pay taxes even if they live elsewhere, but they earn their money in the United Kingdom, and that could be possible.
That is, that's done in the U.S. That's absolutely done in the U.S. So it's entirely possible that they would do that. But again, let's look at the U.S. What are you going to do if, someone in the U.S. wants to go, all right, well, we're going to, I'm going to leave. I'm going to be a tax non-resident. And, there's lots of schemes and ways that people get away with it. But a lot of people will literally just be like, yeah, no, like I'm just fine with not being a U.S. citizen anymore. Like, yeah, screw you. You're gonna put a gun to my head and say I'm gonna take all of your money away because it's like I don't earn any of this money in the States. I'll just not be a U.S. citizen. All right, like that's fine. And if the UK wants to do this, that's great. They have to go through the entire process of doing it. But again, if that's gonna happen, well, guess what? All of those people that are living in the UK, and a lot of them, have moved to the UK and have companies and things elsewhere, well, they're just not going to come to the UK anymore. It's just, again, I'm like, I understand some of the points that Gary makes, and I think some of them are kind of reasonable in terms of, attempting to make it less attractive to hoard wealth in the realm of finite resources like land and property. That's kind of reasonable. That's kind of a semi-reasonable economic proposal. But I do feel that he does himself a disservice by always oversimplifying it when he's on other platforms and says, tax the rich. It's like, no. I think that is what he means. I think that is what he means. And to be honest, I think that is what he means because he's trying to, build some sort of fame and influence for himself. I honestly do think that is his goal. Maybe he's got a great end goal after he gets 10 million, 100 million subscribers. But my guess is he kind of just wants that influence, which is fine. I don't have a problem with that. Somebody going after, fame and, wealth. That's fine. I don't have a problem with it. But it does mean that, I can't really take him seriously in terms of his economic proposals because they do seem empty. They do seem like, they seem like a grift. I hate to say it because I think this guy is being genuine. It's just that he's kind of genuine because he's convinced himself that he is the Messiah. And that's not, I don't like that. It's not a good deal for me. So, I do worry about that kind of stuff because the proposals that he's making, when he does make them, some of them have some value, but the general theme that he's going for is very much like a communist, eat the rich don't deserve their money. We should French Revolution them. We should be doing all kinds of super crazy stuff. And again, the proposals that he has, the way he frames them in that they're such a losing battle, the only way you could actually implement any of these policies is to utilize an enormous amount of, force. And by force, I mean legit violence to achieve them. And we've seen that before. It doesn't work. The wealth redistribution doesn't work. It just, ends up, okay, instead of it's in the hands of, the rich, the capitalist bourgeoisie factory owners that, built their factories out of their blood, sweat, and tears. Now it goes to the state. And it goes into, nepotism. It goes into, hey, who are my, government lackeys and cronies? That's the people that get rich. All right. You see that in China. You see that in the Soviet Union. It's just, all right, instead of it's, we're redistributing the rich people's assets amongst all the poor, working class, middle class people. No, it all goes to the state. And now the state is the super rich elite. And you're basically just returning to the aristocracy. You're just calling it something slightly different. Instead of it being, hey, this is the Duke, he's the Commissar of Commerce. It's just, you're kind of missing the point here. I don't see this as being a viable way in which to get the ends that you're hoping for. So that's kind of that's still my issue with Gary's economics, I'll say. And I think Macro here, Marco, whatever his name is, I think he makes some good points here in terms of the non-feasibility of this, just because of the current market conditions do not allow for taxing the rich well. It's just not a viable plan. But let me know what you think. Let me know in the comments. Tell me how I'm wrong. And then also, let me know if you could even see this video, because some of these videos are disappearing on YouTube. Restricted mode, especially if you're in the UK. I would imagine that because of your government's fantastic new dox yourself policy, you probably are not seeing these videos as much. Let me know in the comments if that's true. Good luck in all your endeavors. Thank you very much for your time and attention. I really do appreciate it. And I'll say farewell for now. All right. That was that. Now, do I want to see the rest of these TikToks about the economy? I do kind of want to go back to the beginning. We'll skip the Gary's economics one.
Please don't listen to this woman. This doesn't make any sense to me. Okay. She has a terrible track record.
Do you agree with everything Kevin O'Leary says?
Absolutely not, no. TikTok, the best place to learn economics. Or is it, hey, I'm Yuri, I have a PhD in economics, and I make economics science-based analysis here on Money and Macro.
Money and Macro. I don't know why I kept calling, I know why I called him Marco.
Today, we're doing something a little different. Today, my producer picked the wildest,
TikTok.
most insightful, or interesting TikToks and YouTube shorts.
Again, I'm like, they're viral. There's a reason why TikTok engages certain people in economics. It's because the people that in there can basically reduce their stuff down to a soundbite that emotionally resonates with them. That's why a Gary's economics or somebody like that, that's why they take off. That's why they get this cult of personality around them. It's because they're tapping into some emotional resonance. Specifically for the UK, you go, okay, like you have a landed gentry, you have a long storied history of the rich people being unworthy of the riches. They basically got there because they fought in some war, they were friends with a king, they, some bullcrap like that, and therefore they get a noble title. And maybe you even go, hey, look, all right, that guy earned it because he, led an incredible siege against this castle and, won a war single-handedly. Great. He's elevated to a ducal house and he's got an enormous amount of wealth. Okay, well, what about his kids? What about his kids' What about, down and down and down and down and down. So you've got a long history, thousands of years, of everyone who's rich. Statistically speaking, the majority of them did not earn their wealth. They just simply inherited it. And therefore, you have a real skepticism, a real cynicism that when you see somebody who's rich, who's got wealth and assets and these types of things, that they probably don't deserve it. And historically speaking, you'd be right. You'd be right to make that bet. It's not the case right now. It's just not. It's just statistically speaking, the fact of the matter is that's not the case. The majority of people, the vast majority, something like, I don't know, 90%, let's say, I'm just making up numbers, but the vast majority of people in the UK specifically who are, millionaires who would be hit by these, big, enormous wealth tax and these types of things made their money. They made their money. They were entrepreneurs. They built a business. They built a successful business, and that business created an enormous amount of value for other people. And, people voluntarily gave them their money. Why shouldn't they be able to keep that fruit of their labor? Why should it not belong to them? Well, because you're not doing well. You work hard. Yeah, you work hard. So why can't you have this amount of money? Isn't that unfair? Doesn't that make you feel angry and pissed off that you're not doing as well as this person? Of course it does. So all I need to do is make a couple TikToks that engage you and engage that feeling of emotional vengeance. I should not be poor. I work hard. I'm sure you do. But apparently, you're not solving a real, risky problem. You're not taking this crazy, weird, risky endeavor that could easily fail, and then it solves an enormous problem. You did not make the world a better place. Which, it sounds horrible. You made the world a better place by your existence because you're a human being, and hopefully the people that you interact with on a day-to-day basis, your wife, your kids, your friends, your parents, hopefully their life is enriched by your presence. But you didn't solve an enormous economic problem. And therefore, why would you need to be rich? I understand you want to be. We all want to be, right? But we want it for nothing. And that's just not the way the world works. Maybe it would be better if it would, but I'm skeptical of that. I'm honestly really skeptical of that. If everybody were just, insanely rich and wealthy, all of our problems would be solved. I'm just not sure that's the case.
She could find about economics and asked me to react to them. But just to be clear, I haven't seen any of these before. So what you're about to see are my honest first reactions, and then potentially a second one if I have to do a little bit of fact checking to make sure that I give a proper response. So let's see what kind of economic wisdom or chaos the internet has in store for us today.
My fact checking is done entirely through comments. So if I got something wrong, do let me know. Pop it down in the comments.
The stock market is projected to crash, followed by the economy. And you are not going to freak out. You're going to be ready. With the tariff wars, with the boycotts, if you needed another excuse to stop spending money, here's another one. I need all the girly pops that stop spending money at Target to have that money ready to invest once the market crashes. The 2008 stock market crash made so many people rich, and we're going to be one of them. If you have stocks, sell them now.
Okay, please don't listen to this woman. So in the beginning, she says the stock market is expected to crash. This is something that just doesn't work that way. In the sense that if everybody expects the stock market to crash, then it should have already crashed, because then of course people are not going to be holding their stocks. They should have already sold them.
This is true.
So I think for me, as an economist that has studied financial markets for a long time or studied research about financial markets, this is one of the key insights. Nobody knows what the stock market will do next. This is really one thing that researchers find all the time. The stock market is fundamentally unpredictable. So what she's essentially saying is buy the dip, meaning that, okay, if the stock market goes down now, in many cases in history, for example, the Great Recession, but also during COVID, you could have made a lot of money if you bought the dip. But the way I see it, there are two big problems with that. The first is you never know really what the dip is.
Exactly.
And the second is that, yes, stock market always goes back up, has been the case for a very long time.
Stock market doesn't go back up everywhere, which is why you want to buy broad-based.
Time in the United States, in many other places, but not everywhere. It doesn't have to be that way. For example, the example that I always used in my classes when I taught financial economics is Japan. The bubble popped, the early 90s in Japan, a financial bubble. Stock market, the Nikkei index collapsed, and it really took more than 20 years for it to recover to the level that it was back then. So for most people then, buying the dip wouldn't have worked, because you didn't know what the dip would have been, so you may have bought even still pretty high, and you could have lost money.
Is the only reason that prices go up is due to inflation? Is that the only reason that prices will go up, yes or no?
Inflation is defined.
That's kind of, okay. So this, let me pop back here for just get this chart back. Okay. So let's say that you had stock in the Nikkei index. You sold it here at, you know, at the high point, and then you bought the dip. Now, let's just say you bought the dip here. Okay, you buy the dip down here, and it's going to go lower. It's going to go lower. But here's the thing. This, you buy the dip here, this, because you've leveraged this higher amount right here, and you bought the dip down here, you therefore have a larger piece of the Nikkei index. You have a larger piece of the pie. And therefore, when it goes up to here, you've basically multiplied, you know, the amount that you had. So let's say like up here you had 5%, you buy it, and you invest the exact same amount of money. The exact same amount of money down here buys you 15%. Okay, well then you now got 15% when it, you know, goes back up and it basically went, let's say it doubled. Okay, so now it's worth like, you know, 30% of, you know, the stock market. Like you have made money. But yeah, not as much as people would say that you did. But you did make money.
Buying the dip.
The
All right,
only
what does this
reason
guy
that
say?
prices go up is due to inflation. Is that the only reason that prices will go up? Yes or no?
This guy.
Inflation is defined as prices going up.
But I'm asking you, is that the only reason? I know what the inflation definition is.
Well,
Is that the only reason?
It's not that it's due to inflation, it's that it is inflation.
Lord have mercy. I know, I get it. Is that the only reason that prices of gas and groceries will go up?
Wait.
Is because of inflation. Here, hold on.
A few
Oh my
moments
God.
later.
Wait. I want you to define the term inflation.
Dude, stop.
No.
12 seconds later.
Well, it's the general level of prices for goods and services rises, reducing the purchasing power of money over time.
Thank you. So you just defined inflation as
Right.
rising prices.
Oh my God.
Okay.
Bingo.
So I don't think you're getting this. I
No,
asked
I
You're
don't
not
think you're
under-
getting this. You just said is the only reason for rising prices. Do you get that?
No, you're not. Hear me out. Hold on.
No.
Walt, please just hear me out, please.
So if you go on the internet, most people, define inflation as all prices going up. So the guy here is correct. Prices going up cannot be the cause of prices going up. But
Clearly.
money supply expanding, which is the previous definition of inflation, could be, is not always, could be the cause of prices going up. So that's maybe something to keep in mind if you look at inflation videos, especially from the Bitcoin crowd. They tend to use a different definition of inflation than most economists and most people
Really?
today.
Listen, the last 70
All right, we did this one already. Let me pop forward. This guy, super rich. We did already that. No, that's an ad.
So my producers told me that in the UK there's this initiative that Gary supports, taxes the super rich, vulnerable friends and family members.
All right, pop
The
ahead.
truth is, the Chinese economy is based on the US dollar in the sense that everything outside of their economy settles in USD. Nobody wants to take the Chinese yuan and hold that long term. They have no idea what the policymakers are going to do with it. So if you want to do business out of Hong Kong or out of China, you ask to settle in US dollars. And that's really what the Chinese are frustrated about.
So he says, look, the Chinese economy is based on the US dollar. Yeah, I think he's correct in the sense that the Chinese rely on the US global dollar system. And so for their exports, they're very often paid in dollars. And the Chinese renminbi is just not a world currency like the US dollar is. And this is a significant source of power for the US. Now, if they're actually frustrated about this, that's not so clear. They have made moves to internationalize their currency, and this would help them so much in their global power struggle against the US. But at the same time, O'Leary says, but you don't know what Chinese policymakers will do. I think that's partially true, although in many areas they're more stable than the US policymakers, which, is Trump very predictable when it comes to dollar policy? Not so much, perhaps. Although you do have an independent central bank in the US, which will help. But the main thing holding the Chinese currency back is that they have capital controls, meaning that you cannot, as a foreigner, easily get money out of China. And this, of course, it makes it a very unattractive currency for many foreigners to hold, but not everywhere. Like, for example, Russia has really switched to using the renminbi a lot internationally compared to the dollar because they are, of course, sanctioned.
Well, because of the sanctions, yeah. So, I mean, but once those sanctions, if those sanctions go away, then, they're just going to pop right back. And they're going to go, they're going to just absolutely ditch all of their won. Is it won? It's not won. Won is South Korea.
So this is changing a little bit, but I think the main point O'Leary is saying here is correct.
Do you agree with everything Kevin O'Leary says?
Absolutely not. No.
You blame the U.S.'s pressure for Japan's economic decline.
They were richer than any European country, than Germany, than France, than Italy. They've moved to the bottom of the rung now. We effectively forced them to move faster, to open up and deregulate than culturally and politically they were ready to. There's this thing called the Plaza Accord in September 1985 where we pushed them to make their exchange rate more. And I used to say, well, you did that in 1985. We date the crisis in 1992. It's 7 years later. And I think I continued to think that. But I would say over the years, and particularly in recent years, I'm thinking I was wrong. You know, these things unfold slowly. Crises don't happen overnight. They deregulated and it worked, but they didn't know what they were doing. And I think this was a huge mistake by Japan to agree. Financial repression's bad, but financial liberalization needs to be done gradually. And if you do it too quickly, you get a crisis. That's many crises caused by that.
Suppose that crisis hadn't happened. How much wealthier is Japan today?
Oh, I think 50% wealthier per person.
Yeah, I mean, you're just pulling numbers out of your ass. It's just speculation, magic numbers. Oh man, what could it have been? Oh man, everybody would be like 100 times richer, man. And I'm like, dude, like, it's just not the case. If you could actually predict that stuff, you would say, like, the financial crisis, okay, these things unfold slowly. They unfold slowly for a number of reasons. The reason that these things happen, like you make a switch and it filters down, it's because every other aspect of the economy, especially in one where you have, some free market forces that are, sanctioned by the system, because you always have free market system. Like every system, even the most authoritarian system on the planet, has the free market in there simply because of the fact that people want certain things. And therefore, you're always going to have like a black market. North Korea has a free market in the sense that there is some black market where people just operating on free market principles. I want this, you have this, I'll give you this for that. And we negotiate and we make a trade. Okay. The thing is that because of that, these big policy changes then filter through, the free market, and they go, okay, well, some people can react to these things. Some people react poorly. Some people react well. Some people change their policies based on this kind of stuff. And they just have a totally different effect than you might, imagine. And then these things happen later on down the line. So you can't even necessarily trace them to certain things. Because I'm like, it's just, you get into a weird place because the economy is such an enormous thing. If you could accurately predict it, then all the command economy stuff would have worked. Like you could have had a communist socialist state that actually does everything it wants to do and does it effectively. But that's the whole point, is that, the economy is too complicated to do that. The only way to actually get, picking winners and losers, the only way to make these things happen is to have like a distributed intelligence network where every individual force is making the best decision as they see it. And therefore you average out the computational crisis of like, where to allocate resources.
I think way wealthier.
Okay, so this is very interesting. This was Kenneth Rogoff, very respected economist. I respect him a lot. I just disagree with him here in the sense that he just basically says, look, we as the United States ruined the Japanese economy through the Plaza Accord. This is a very common narrative, especially in China. The Chinese policymakers looked at this and said, we want to avoid this at all costs. What happened is that Japan had a huge trade surplus with the United States. The United States said, look, the dollar is overvalued. You, along with Germany, many European countries, France, I think as well, should lower your exchange rates artificially, or at least do that by government actions. And that happened. But there's a couple of points here that I can't square with his explanation. Is that Germany and France also participated in this same agreement, and they didn't have this crisis then. Now, of course, he says, look, the Japanese then also were forced to liberalize their financial system too quickly. This caused a bubble. Yeah, I've read about that. I think could have played a role, absolutely. But at the same time, we've seen these kinds of bubbles in many places that didn't have something similar to this Plaza Accord as well. Circling back to China, China had their own huge real estate bubble. They also had this surplus. They never went into this Plaza Accord, and they went through the same thing as the Japanese. So I don't fully buy this, that everything that's good or bad that happens to other countries is because of something that the United States did.
Right now, the Bitcoin's around 105,000. Our forecast for 2030 is $1.5 million.
So you think Bitcoin will potentially multiply in value by 15 times in the next 5 years? Wow, that'd be pretty crazy.
The building blocks for that, the three biggest building blocks are institutional, which has barely started, store of value or digital gold. Young people are much more comfortable with digital gold than gold.
So on the institutional side,
Yeah.
that means
I don't know about comfortable. They're just like it's more of like the fad.
investment institutions start investing in it. Young people start investing in it as a way to save and store their money.
Yes. Yes.
That's
and
fair.
then the very important use case that many people do not discuss
What's the
is
third?
how important Bitcoin and stable coins, which are backed by US treasuries, are going to become to the emerging markets. In emerging markets, many of them are at the whim of policymakers who show no discipline in fiscal or monetary policy. And so they're used.
Yes, they're basically saying like, okay, Bitcoin or whatever, stable coin is going to become the new reserve currency. Bitcoin will become the new dollar. Obviously, that'd be great for people who are holding Bitcoin. That'd be great. I don't know if it's going to happen just because of the difficulty in exchanging it for stuff. Hey, who can buy stuff with Bitcoin? Yeah, it happens in some places, but it's not there yet. It's entirely possible that, that stuff will get built out, and then, you will have a straight up Bitcoin economy in terms of, you can actually buy and sell goods with Bitcoin. People will be doing that. The problem is that, if the price is fluctuating that highly, you're always going to be better served by holding on to it and paying in some crappy, local currency, because, you're holding on to this. Like if you were a gold miner back in the day, you were an idiot if you, sold your gold. If you're like, hey, I'm going to buy a shot of whiskey with a little piece of gold dust, you're an idiot if you did that. You're pissing your money away because that gold is getting more and more valuable every second you hold it. So why would you ever use your Bitcoin to buy a soda or something like that? You wouldn't. It'd be insane. And I don't know if I see that. The emerging market stuff is like, okay, well, maybe in these huge, giant, large industries, it's like, so I want to use a Bitcoin to finance building a factory. Okay, great. But it's also like, okay, you can do that, but isn't it more valuable just to hold on to your Bitcoin, especially if, it's going to be $100 million to make this factory. So I got to use $100 million worth of Bitcoin. Well, Bitcoin is, it's a hold of value, and it's, it's increasing in value. I can just not do anything. I can not risk this. Keep my $100 million in Bitcoin, and, next year it'll be worth, $120 million. I made $20 million by doing nothing. Why wouldn't I do that? So, I don't know if the use case is ever going to really happen. I haven't seen enough about this, but in terms of, it being a good investment down the line, I think that's definitely the case.
To going through booms and busts and booms and bailed out by the IMF, and they need an insurance policy.
So if you're in Venezuela, you need a currency that's going to be stable.
Exactly.
Okay. Kathy Wood, very famous investor. First note is, at least in the last few years, she has a terrible track record. So she is very famous, I think, mostly for predicting technology. Stocks would always go up. And at first, of course, she made a lot of money with that. But then she also lost investors a lot of money. And she underperformed, I think, in the stock market for a very long time. So
yeah. And I mean, this is kind of the whole thing. If you're in the stock market long enough, you're going to lose. I mean, this is the famous Warren Buffett experiment. Okay? Can you beat the market? Can you do better than just investing in the overall market? Can you do 3 to 5% year on year on average for your entire career? You can't. It's nobody's done. I think maybe one guy did it, and I'm like, okay, maybe he's just done it up until now, but it's very, very, very difficult to do that the whole way through. It's really tough. It's kind of impossible. And I mean, you know, predicting this, it makes sense. If you could really predict this stuff that well, then, you know, a command economy makes sense.
Look, the thing is, her job is to push certain assets, and if she is believable, then people invest in her fund. And so this is just, so she has a huge interest in saying this. That being said, you know, Bitcoin, what she says is, look, Bitcoin is increasingly digital gold, and it's becoming important in emerging markets. That's something we've already seen. We have seen absolutely in emerging markets like Turkey, for example, that people are investing where the currency is very unstable, so you can lose the value of your money, just declines over time.
Right.
What we've seen there is,
now, of course, the other side of this is, you know, using it as an investment. You can invest, you know, your, again, like lira in Turkey. You can buy other stuff with it. You can buy other things, like, you know, a lot of people that invested in Bitcoin were like, okay, cool, I'd like to invest in more hard assets. Like, I want to buy property. I want to buy an apartment in Paris because that's going to go up. I think that's, you know, it's a better store of value, and it's certainly more stable because it's, you know, it's a real asset. It's brick and mortar. It's for real. It's there. You can see it. You can look at it, and, you know, everyone says, yeah, that clearly has value. Of course, it always does. Bitcoin is, you know, a little bit more nebulous. So a lot of people that, you know, do well in Bitcoin will then, you know, take it out, reinvest it in something else that maybe has a little bit, you know, more stability, if, you know, less of an upside.
many people, not just young people, have been buying a lot of gold, have been buying also Bitcoin. Bitcoin is being used for this purpose, absolutely. But also other foreign currencies are very popular there, like euro, dollar. In Argentina, we've also seen the dollar being very important because it's relatively stable compared to the local currency. So Bitcoin is one of those assets. Will it go up by that much? Nobody knows. In financial markets, it's just something that keeps coming back again and again. Researchers have found that, and nobody knows this, but I just have to say that it's in her interest to say that. Like, she makes money if people believe her. So that was the last clip of this video. My overall takeaway from this is that I think YouTube Shorts and TikToks are very interesting, but it's absolutely clear that the barrier to entry to these platforms is very low indeed. But yeah, that was me trying out my new reaction format.
Yeah. How do we like this reaction format, everybody? Super cool, right? Yeah. I mean, I will be honest. Again, it's just kind of like, it's you know, the YouTube Shorts, the TikToks about the economy. It's either you're, you know, I've got a story about the economy. You've been screwed over by those greedy, capitalist, rich people pigs that are controlling everything, and they're just trying to screw you over. Therefore, follow my channel for more information. And eventually, we'll figure this out. We'll make some changes and stuff. That'll be cool. But for right now, just, you know, share this around. Talk to people about this. And, you know, like, if they come back to my channel and subscribe, that's fine. Whatever, no big deal. Or, hey, have you heard about this new thing? I'd like to sell you a bridge. It's really cool. Yeah, so I mean, it's just sales pitches and these types of things. That being said, I mean, I think the Bitcoin is probably a good bet, to be perfectly honest. Like, if I had money, I'd throw some in Bitcoin. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely, like, it's better than just holding your stuff as you know, like $1 or something like that. Like if you just have like cash money somewhere, yeah, you're losing money because of inflation. So you want to invest it into something. And if that thing is Bitcoin, cool. It is, you know, it's less stable than other stuff, but you know, it's cheaper to buy than other stuff. Obviously, like your best bet is to take your money and throw it into, you know, the market, like the Vanguard, you know, total stock analysis, you know, thing, or like some other market trading ETF. You know, put it in the S&P 500, something like that. That's going to give you the most stable return. Even though if you go the S&P route, you can lose money year on year. That's totally a possibility, but long term, you're probably going to get like 10% on average every year, which is a pretty good deal. But yeah, holding it as just cash is silly. If you want to go Bitcoin, go Bitcoin. If you want to go gold, go gold. If you want to go S&P, go that. Obviously, the best, most stable way to do it is, yeah, just the total market ETF.
This time in history to be an entrepreneur.
All right. And now, let's see, this other video, this is the guy who debated Gary Stevenson on Diaries of a CEO. And obviously, I haven't really heard much from him because all the clips are based on Gary's economics, because he's, you know, he's more of like a YouTuber, and therefore he's got a big following, and therefore his videos do better. So of course everyone's going to clip him, and they're going to kind of cut up the other guy. I haven't heard anything about this Daniel Priestley. In fact, let me just real quick. Let me throw this in here. Does he have a YouTube channel? He does. He's got 20,000. He's got 20,000 YouTube subscribers. He's barely doing better than me. He's twice as big as me. All right.
It's the greatest time.
Yeah, Gary's economics has, you know, what, 1.3, 1.4 million. So, you know, slightly better. And again, I think this guy has better points. He's got a more rational argument. He's also got a more optimistic argument. He's got a much better view of the world in terms of like, yeah, like, you know, you can do good stuff. You don't need to be demoralized. You know, your only solution here is to follow me and my channel for advice. You know, his view is like, you know, you could probably get out there and do it yourself. Maybe not in the UK, because the UK is going to take all your money away from you. But, you know, that doesn't mean don't be an entrepreneur. It just means don't be an entrepreneur in the UK.
It's the greatest time in history to be an entrepreneur. There's never been a better time. Minus the crime, London's just an awesome city.
I think Britain's lost more millionaires than any other country in the world. Why do you think that is?
If you create a game where entrepreneurs can't really operate or win, you lose those entrepreneurs. 1% of people earn 14% of the income but pay 30% of the taxes.
So let's just get that, because I think most people don't get this. The top 1% that we always are told are the evil, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
They pay 30%.
This is such a bad chart. This is such a terrible pie chart, because you would think, oh, 1%, and then there's another group that's 14%, and there's another group that's 30%. It's like, no. This 1%, it makes 14%, and it pays 30%. It pays 30%
of the income tax.
I don't think I would have done a pie chart on that, but I get it.
You know, anyone who has come from Eastern European countries, Soviet Union, you know that state-run big government just doesn't work.
Yeah.
Our ancestors, your grandparents, great-grandparents, they would trade places with you in a heartbeat.
Relax. This is not an ad.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's been a long time.
Now, I mean, and again, this kind of comes back to, would your parents, grandparents, you know, trade places with you in a heartbeat? Well, what do you mean? Like, your grandparents definitely had better investment opportunities. Your grandparents' houses cost way less. That's for sure. That's true. Would they trade places with you? And I was like, all right, well, what are they interested in? Like, obviously, medical technology is way better. You can get better, you know, outcomes and these types of things. Like, do you have a kid who's sick, who has some, you know, sort of, you know, disease? Yeah, they would trade places with you in a second. Absolutely. There's no doubt. However, you know, is having like a flat screen, big ass, super nice TV worth not having the security of, like, you know, being able to own a house with a single income, from your blue collar laborer father. Maybe not. Maybe some people are like, no, I'd rather have the house. I understand that completely. But in terms of like just absolute comfort and these types of things and absolute access to valuable amenities such as like the internet. Hey, I've got a magic brick here that's got all the information ever created by humanity at the tip of my fingers. Yeah, like that's straight up sorcery 50 years ago, Your grandparents still can't understand this. If you've ever had to talk your grandmother or grandfather through working a computer, it's like it's pulling teeth. It's talking in a different language. They have no idea what they're doing. You have to use strange analogies like, okay, imagine that the edge of that square, the window, is like a blind, and you want to pinch the end of the blind and you want to pull it down. That's how you get the blind to move. That's how you get the window to get bigger or smaller. And it's total insanity. But again, like, what is the thing that you're valuing? Is the comfort of your everyday existence more important to you than the ability to store up assets and accrue wealth? If so, then yeah, your parents, grandparents, great grandparents, yeah, they would trade places with you in a second. Absolutely.
I'm coming. Really looking forward to our conversation. Before we get into economics and finance and entrepreneurship and business, which we want to talk to you about, and of course, the various tax policies that are being proposed and talked about here in Britain and elsewhere. Just tell us a little bit about your background. Who are you? How do you happen to be here?
Yeah, so I started my first company when I was 21 years old. I've been an entrepreneur ever since. I've had multiple startups. I've had businesses. As you can tell, I'm Australian, so I launched my first company in Australia, but 19 years ago I moved to London, and I've had multiple startups here. Today I have a group of software companies, a training business. I've owned some agencies. I've built companies and sold companies. I've done business in Australia, Singapore, UK, USA, and Canada. Basically working a lot with entrepreneurs. One of the things I've been doing is running an entrepreneur accelerator where we work with 5,500 businesses to take them through a program on entrepreneurship. I work with a lot of entrepreneurs because we have software for entrepreneurs, so I hear a lot and get a lot of data. And over the last 10, 15 years, I've been writing a lot of books about entrepreneurship. So I've written 6 books on entrepreneurship.
That's a lot of books.
So I guess you could say I'm up to my...
That's probably too many books. I don't think you have 6 books worth of entrepreneur knowledge and material. That's probably too many books. If you want those books to be, super valuable. I'll be honest.
In all things
no offense,
related.
And you've also become quite a significant commentator on economics and government policy about certain things, because I think it ties into entrepreneurship, which is a really important part of the economy. People who create new things, create jobs for other people. And it does feel like that's become a big part of the conversation here in Britain, because it feels to me...
I will be honest, I don't know why I'm focusing so much on the UK economy as opposed to the US economy. I guess there's more friction in the UK economy. Like the US economy is doing better after Trump, and it's kind of like, like there's still friction points. There's still like, things where we're like, all right, are the tariffs good? Are they bad? Are they this? Are they that? We're not really sure. Obviously the UK is like, it's a smaller country and therefore there's less buffer room, and they're still having issues in terms of like immigration and these things that are impacting their economy and economic realities, their housing specifically. And therefore, there's more controversy around that. So I guess that's why I'm getting recommended it more, even though it's not relevant to me, obviously.
Yeah, and you're probably better informed that we're actually doing at a government level, at a policy level, a lot of things to discourage people to take risks, to create companies, to generate wealth here in Britain. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it is fair to say. Entrepreneurs want to be positive. These are people who, myself included, love freedom, love autonomy. They're trying to change their life. They're trying to do something that improves their wealth and their circumstances. And these are people who love solving meaningful problems in the world. They're incredibly hardworking. They're they're wired towards solving problems. They're wired towards adding value for others. But ultimately, if you create the circumstances where you just can't get ahead, where if you win, you lose it all in taxes, where if you try and raise money, you create tax problems for yourself. If you create a game where entrepreneurs can't really operate or win, you lose those entrepreneurs. And the other thing that has really happened is that in 2020, the Prime Minister comes on TV and says, hey, you've all got to work at home and you've got to do lockdowns and you have to figure out how you're going to basically live without leaving the front door. And in that year, 2020, 2021, most entrepreneurs discovered that they could run their businesses remotely. They were forced to figure it out. So a lot of entrepreneurs moved their businesses into the cloud. They moved their teams remote. They started investing into building software and putting software in place to be able to run their businesses online. By 22, 23, a lot of successful entrepreneurs who were running offline businesses had put everything in place to be basically living and working from anywhere. Even traditional businesses like restaurants and gyms, you now have the systems in place to essentially live remotely and run those businesses remotely. So COVID lockdowns really forced the entrepreneurial community to figure out how to be digital and how to be anywhere and how to be in the cloud. So what we now have is that we've left that side behind us, that era has now hopefully passed.
Hopefully. Yeah, we hope. Till the next one, right? That's what they're all saying. Till the next one. And then we'll do the exact same thing again, even though we know the consequences. Now that one will be interesting. If they do make another pandemic and they're like, oh yeah, you know what, we got a lockdown. If it's like not the deadliest disease ever encountered by humankind and therefore everybody wants to self-isolate, then I will say, hey, this is a conspiracy by the super rich, basically, informing, or I shouldn't say informing, twisting the arm of government to go, yeah, make everybody stay inside. We want to make sure that we capture even more of the market share. We want to make sure that every single mom and pop business goes out of business so that, our few giant corporations control everything. Then I will get conspiratorial. But for right now, I point the finger at the government and say, yeah, you were the guys that screwed this up. You're the reason there was this enormous wealth transfer. The other, corporations were just there and benefited from it, from your poor decisions.
But we now have a situation where we're putting all these taxes on entrepreneurs, but a lot of entrepreneurs are saying, hey, wait a second, if this isn't the best place to run a business, if I don't have to necessarily be here, where would be better? So, in the same way that if your, local supermarket started putting all of its prices up, you might go, oh, actually, maybe I should shop somewhere else. Maybe I should get a better deal.
Right.
So a lot of entrepreneurs are saying, hey, maybe I should be in Dubai, or maybe I should be in Italy, or maybe I should be in the USA. Or
does Italy have good taxes? I feel like Italy's not that great tax-wise.
Maybe I should run my business from a beach in Thailand, and all of that's actually possible. It's not hard to do now. So
what is the thing with Thailand and the UK? Whenever they mention a tropical paradise, they're like Thailand. Whenever Gary's Economics, whenever he mentions like, oh man, I should be on a beach sipping Mai Tais, it's always Thailand. Is it Thailand or is it the Philippines? It's one of the two.
We now find ourselves in a really awkward situation where we do have a lot of the value-creating employers, innovators, who have a lot more choice as to where they're going to run their business from.
And we see that in the statistics. So I think Britain's lost more millionaires than any other country in the world, except maybe China. But if you take a per capita comparison, you can tell how bad the situation is.
Let's see what this says. All right. Canada, the U.S., getting some millionaires. That's pretty good. Now, is it just migration? It's just it is movements. Okay, so it's not like new millionaires were created. Okay, that's interesting. China, 15,000. Yeah, 9,500 from the UK. Yikes. Man, that's huge. Because, I mean, you figure the UK is what? A 10th, at least? A 10th the size? I think it's probably like a 20th the size of China. So you figure what? It's more like 95,000 moved away from China. Yikes.
Become, and is that because of the things you're describing, or is anything else going on? Because I imagine if you're quite a wealthy person, or if you've done well for yourself, actually you're probably quite well insulated against some of the issues that most people day to day deal with in Britain, you know, whether it's like street crime or whatever. You're sort of protected from it. You probably live in a comfortable
you can be.
place. And actually the upside of being in Britain is very high. You know, the infrastructure, the theatre, the restaurants, all of that stuff really is very special here. So I know that a lot of people are quite reluctant to leave, and yet they are leaving. Why do you think that is?
Well, that's a really great point. London is one of the most exciting cities in the world. You know, it's an amazing city, especially when it's well run. And
what makes the cities exciting? Usually when people say like exciting, they're like, oh, it's the most exciting, it's the most dynamic. They usually are talking about like economic opportunity, you know? At least that's always been my sense in terms of like it's the most exciting city in the world. I don't know. I don't find cities exciting. I find them just like dirty and crowded and not worth my time. Although then again, I'm used to like European American cities. You know, I'm not used to like Asian cities. Maybe Asian cities are different, and they'd be like, "Oh no, this is actually just like an exciting place. You never know what's around the next corner." Yeah, like you never know what's around the next corner in Chicago. It could be a bullet or a knife. You're never sure. It's very exciting. Not the kind of good exciting though.
If there's not crime,
there you go.
You know, minus the crime, London's just an awesome city. Right. It's just such a great, especially London on a sunny day. It's very hard to beat. But yeah, look, there's a few things that relate to very wealthy people, which is we changed the non-dom status, and it's a really misunderstood set of rules. If you have, and you know, London was presented as a very global city, a city that you can be here and run a global business from here. So a lot of people who run global businesses like being in London, and they like running their empire, you know, that's around the world and being based in London. But if you create a system where
I'm trying to think of what non-dom means. Is that like non-domestic?
Everything that you do everywhere in the world is also going to be taxed in the UK, then it makes very little sense when other countries don't have that system. You know, if you, let's say you've got a manufacturing business and it's in the family and it's in India, then you're an Indian person who's chosen to live in London. You don't want to have a situation where everything that's happening in your family business over here is also being taxed by HMRC. If you were to die in this country, we have some of the highest death taxes, inheritance taxes. So you then find yourself in a situation where you could...
How does everybody feel about death taxes? Like, I hate them. I hate the idea of a death tax. I hate the idea of like I die and the government just takes half of everything that I have. You know, it doesn't go to my kids, doesn't go to my family, it goes to the government. And I mean, it'd be one thing if the government was actually like doing good stuff with it. Then you could go, all right, well, at least it's going towards a good cause. But it's like, it's just getting pissed away. It's just getting absolutely pissed away on total bullcrap. You know, it's lining some, you know, government bureaucrats' brothers' pockets for some, you know, oh, this person ran a study on how viable this new government project would be. And then, you know, his cousin ran another study on how accurate that study was. Okay. How do we pay for that? We took it all away from that guy. He died and all of his assets went to, you know, pay for my new Lamborghini as a government contractor. I really don't. I hate it. I hate the entire idea of a death tax and inheritance tax. It's insane to me. It's complete. It's despicable to me. It really is. It's really completely insane to me.
You could lose 40% of everything that you own just because, you know, of the death taxes here.
40%.
Death taxes or inheritance taxes when it relates to entrepreneurship is very, very dangerous because fire sailing a business to pay those kind of taxes crashes the value of the business, and you actually essentially destroy the business. Businesses are very delicate things.
Yeah.
So if you overtax them, if you put
This is exactly the same thing with like the farm protests that were around a couple months ago, maybe a year ago or something like that, where it was like, okay, if you have a farm in the UK, if you want to pass that on to your kids, you don't have to pay taxes on it. And you're paying taxes based on, not the income of the farm, but the total value of the farm, which means the land that's on the farm, plus the farm, all the equipment, all of that type of stuff. You have to pay for that. Now, how are you going to do that? You're a farmer. You're not making, year on year an enormous amount of money. In fact, a lot of farmers straight up make no money. They basically, they do not pay themselves a salary. They just, every bit of money that comes in goes directly back into the farm. They pay for all of their incidentals, and that's it. They put away no money. Everything goes right back into the farm. They pay for their kids' education or something like that, and that's it. They get no extra money. So then what happens if you have to, pay extra taxes on that? Okay, well, you have to sell off part of your land. It's like, all right, what, like, why? Like, I mean, you have to sell off part of your land to pay for that. And it's like, okay, well, now my, farm is less valuable. And also I'm able to farm less. And there is a legitimate, economy of scale where it's like, yeah, if I have a bigger farm, I can actually produce more and more efficiently. So at this point, you'd go, okay, well, now we just can't have farms in Britain anymore because, 50 years down the line, they've all been cut up and sold off so much that it's completely financially impractical to farm anything at all. And it's like, all right, well, I hope you're happy getting your food from, another country, happy importing all your food. And it's not, way more expensive and way crappier. And you're now, there's a knife to your throat anytime you do anything with another country because they can just shut off their, food supply to you.
Put in regulations, often they're just not competitive. We live in a global world where you have to be globally competitive, and that's what's happening. Britain has tipped this balance of being a globally competitive and desirable place to run a business to really just tipping across to being, there's too many things: the crime, the taxes, the inheritance tax, the non-dom status, the ability to trade, all that sort of stuff. It's just kind of tipped over to where a lot of people who are from around the world have just gone, actually, I can either go back to where I'm from, or I can move on to the next entrepreneurial hub.
A lot of people will be listening and watching this and going, well, these people are super rich. Like, the rich don't pay, the rich need to pay their fair share. That's a phrase that I hear a lot.
You hear it a lot.
And I actually genuinely don't, to say that someone should pay their fair share without ever quantifying it is kind of a slogan that doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
It's, and it's clearly a slogan that works. It gets people into your, into your YouTube channel. But yeah, it doesn't solve any problems. It just gets people, riled up and pissed off enough to subscribe to your stuff and keep watching your videos. But it definitely doesn't help anything.
I don't always know what people mean, and therefore I don't know if I agree or not. What's your take on that idea? The rich need to pay their fair share.
Well, let's kind of break it down first principles. The government spends about £18,000 per person, man, woman, and child. So government spending is very, very high. 45% of the UK economy is now government spending. So we are essentially a 55% real businesses and independent businesses that could run anywhere, and then 45% which is spending from the government. So that's
weird. So how much of that 55% is the super rich? Like how much of that economic activity of the 55% is like the super rich? Because in that sense, it would seem like the government is the biggest holder of money and capital in the UK, which is certainly what I would think, and that would be my assumption. But apparently, again, I know I'm shitting on Gary's economics a lot, but I think he deserves it. Yeah.
It's very, very high. It's historically high. It's about as high as it's been since World War II. So a peacetime high for government spending. So we have this huge government, and it's £18,000 per person. So you might say,
and it's also doing such a good job. I mean, maybe I'm not a UK citizen. I only am observing, but apparently the people that are living there are not super happy with their government programs.
that anything north of £18,000 per person, you are paying your fair share, you're covering your lot. If you're paying more than £18,000 per person, now bear in mind, if you've got a family of 4, you've got $72,000 to pay in taxes, right? So it's quite a lot. So you could say, oh, anyone who pays more than that is covering their fair share and then some.
I don't think that's how people think about it.
That's not how people
think about it. But then you could say, oh, isn't it interesting that 1% of people earn 14% of the income, which is high, but they pay 30% of the taxes. So they're earning 14% and they're paying double the equivalent in taxes, because as soon as you hit a certain threshold, the taxes just go sky high. And I can imagine that for someone who's never hit that threshold, you probably go, why are these people complaining? Because Britain actually is one of the best places in the world to have a fairly low income. So if you have a moderate income, if you're smack bang in the middle, and especially historically since World War II, this is the best time to be earning average. You know, the tax-free threshold of £12,000, the 20% rate up to 50 grand, you know, all of that is historically low. So, you know,
which is true. This is very true. Yeah, like poor people got taxed really highly back in the past.
Back post-war era, you paid about 35% on a moderate income. So you sit there and go, oh, why are these people complaining about taxes? But here's what the UK have done. They've basically said, as soon as you...
That's the same. I mean, like, and that's the other side of this, where it's like, all right, we, you know, oh man, we're looking at that post-war era, and we're saying this is an incredible period of time. Gary's economics. The rich were taxed super high rate, and I'm like, everybody was taxed at a super high rate.
You enter that top bracket, we basically double it. Everything doubles. So if you're a dentist and you run a dental practice, you know, you might be paying reasonable taxes as you approach 100,000 a year. As soon as you get over 100,000 a year, it jumps to this weird bracket where you're paying 60% of every marginal pound. And then as soon as you get up over 150,000, you're paying 45% on this, and then you're paying all these other taxes. If you try and take some money out of your business, you end up paying the corporation tax, and then you pay the 45% tax because you've now taking it into your personal name, and then you pay 20% when you spend it. So there's like, basically, as soon as you get up into this top bracket, it's just crazy levels of tax. So what happens is, you know, if you're talking about fair share, 14% of people earn, 1% of people earn 14% of the income but pay 30% of the taxes.
So let's just get that, because I think most people don't get this. The top 1% that we always are told are the evil, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
They pay 30% of the income tax.
Yeah.
In the country.
And it's not just income tax.
All tax.
It's also, if you look at who's paying.
That's interesting. So, like, when you say they're paying 30% of the tax, so the top 1% are paying for 30% of all government spending. Probably not all government spending, because they're probably doing a lot of, like, what do you call it? Like borrowing money. I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know about that if the UK, if they're doing the same thing the US is doing, which is just like running up a huge giant debt. But they're paying, yeah, I mean, like, you know, they're paying 30% of all the tax. I mean, that's just, yeah, it's crazy.
Corporation tax, it's also the same group of people. And it's, if you say who's paying stamp duty, well, it's those people as well.
Right.
And these people probably, I mean, I know the world's not fair, right? It sucks. The world isn't fair. But it is that group of people who are spending the most, paying the most in VAT, paying the most in other taxes. They generate the most in corporate tax. It's the same group of people who pay all the taxes.
Right. Because when you put it like that, if 1% of people, and look, they're doing very well, right? But if they're paying 30% of all the tax intake in the country, I don't know how you can argue that's not fair.
It's historically high.
Yeah. And I've been...
I do wonder about historically high. I mean, like, again, I think he's got a broader view of history, which is why I kind of prefer his view on it. But I don't know if there's like, there's other errors. I'd be curious about the golden era of capitalism, like the 50s and stuff, 50s to 70s, that Gary Stevenson always bangs on about, specifically the 50s. I wonder how much those top earners were paying in terms of like tax income, like as percentage, because I know their rates were really high, but I do wonder how much percentage of the tax income they were paying. I don't know off the top of my head.
I've been I've been poor. I've been really poor. I've been wealthy at times. There's times when I've done all right. It's never really made much sense to me, the attitude we have in this country to people who are successful. And I think partly is, I think I've said this before, I think because Britain had a landed gentry and an aristocracy.
That's it.
A lot of people think that if you have wealth.
And again, I mean, this is kind of the reason why even Karl Marx said, the U.S. will never embrace communism. Communism will not work there. Communism shouldn't work there. All of these arguments are really not germane to the conversation of the U.S. because the U.S. does not have the same degree of, they don't have aristocracy. They don't have the concentration of wealth in these, the super bourgeoisie, these types of things, and they retain it over generations. The U.S. has always had an enormous amount of social mobility, class mobility in terms of, money. People can go from nothing, they can get incredibly wealthy, and then they can lose it all within 1 or 2 generations. And therefore, the idea of, the kind of the communist revolution, these things is just, it doesn't hit the same in America as it does many other places in the world, because there's not a history of aristocracy, landed gentry, nobility running everything, and then also having all the money.
It's because your granddad was rich, and you have now these have ill-gotten gains that you did nothing to do, and all you do is spend your time, playing polo or whatever.
Believe it or not, that category of person, globally, the UK is actually very, very low for inherited wealth.
Really?
Yeah, we have very high inheritance taxes. Yep. We do have a small aristocratic elite who still exist.
And although I will wonder, I do wonder, because I mean, you see it all the time, how much actual wealth do they have? Obviously they've got an enormous amount of wealth in terms of land, because they inherit this land. But I do wonder how much actual money they're bringing in, because you see it all the time in all these historical dramas where a duke has to marry some rich industrialist's daughter to pay for the property, because it's yeah, we can't live like this with our income. We don't have any income. We have these big giant huge properties, but we don't have any income from them. So I have to marry somebody else to, get a big giant dowry to pay for this stuff. You see it all the time.
But no, the vast majority of people in the UK are self-made. If they're millionaires, they're self-made.
And let's just clarify what that means as well, Daniel, because self-made, effectively, I'm sure there are exceptions to this, but by and large, in a capitalist system, if you've made £1 million, that means you've provided millions and millions of pounds worth of value to other people who've been willing to pay you money for it, effectively, right?
Yeah, well, when we say self-made, we're talking about you didn't inherit it. Right. You weren't given large amounts of gifts or loans by parents or family. You didn't have some sort of amazing, massive head start in life. You might have, look, you might be from a 2-family upper middle class household, but you go off and start your own business and start your own thing. So there's different categories of self-made. Look, I've got friends and clients who literally they started out being born in slums in Philippines or India, and
this is another thing about self-made. Let's say that you were born to rich parents. Let's say you were to make and they were okay, hey, we're gonna give you $1 million. Oh god, hang on a second. Bad cough out of the way. But yes, let's say that we've got oh, hi, Minty Miku. How's it going? Anyway, So like, let's say that your parents are wealthy, you were brought up wealthy and these types of things. Let's say they kick you out at 18 and they go, here's $1 million. All right, now let's say you turn that $1 million into $100 million. That's kind of like, to me, that's you're self-made. If you 100x your, money, that's you're kind of, a successful. I would even go so far as to be like, all right, let's say like you doubled your money. That's kind of like, yeah, you're self-made in a lot of ways.
Become self-made millionaires. That's the wonderful world that we live in at the moment. It is actually possible in the world that we currently live in to start with absolutely nothing and become a multimillionaire. But self-made in this country just simply means you didn't inherit it, you didn't get any major loans or gifts in order to get onto the wealth ladder. And then if you think about entrepreneurs as a group, the only way that you can actually be successful as an entrepreneur is that you solve a valuable problem that other people want to exchange their cash for. We have a free market system where ultimately I'm going to build something or develop something and you're going to say, hey, that I would rather that than my £100. So I'm going to give you my £100 and you're going to give me the thing that you've built.
Doing good. That's
the
good.
Service or the product or the software.
Glad to hear
so
it.
Ultimately, like, for example.
What are you up to this morning? Or whatever time it is where you're at?
For me, I've created software. One of the companies that I've got, scoreapp.com, we have over 8,000 businesses around the world that are paying subscribers to our software. So they, every single month, have the choice to cancel their software or subscribe or pay even more. And they get so much value from what we deliver that they continue to pay. And we have to keep delivering more and more value every single month so that they don't want to cancel. So the whole system of how I've made my money is by coming up with ways to add value to people at scale.
Daniel, do you think also part of the problem?
Just got up. All right, Al, thanks for hopping in. Appreciate it.
Is that cost of living crisis, housing crisis, everything seems to be in crisis in this country, and people are quite understandably angry and frustrated about that. They feel like the system is rigged. So it's a potentially good vote winner.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely. At these sorts of moments, we see populism on both sides. You might have a vote winner that is, anti-migrant, or you might have a vote winner that is anti-rich. Any of those highly emotional things. People want to blame somebody. There's a couple of things that are happening. There's this term called late stage capitalism. I don't really believe in it. I think there's late stage government spending. What happens is
I completely agree with that. I hate the term late stage capitalism. I'm like, call it, you can call it corporatism, which is okay. Where in which you have, the government that is incredibly powerful, that is made up of politicians that are corrupt and therefore, bought up by interest groups, whether they're corporations or they're, political agencies, whatever. You can call that corporatism. Again, I don't think that's great because it doesn't mean that, the government people are only taking orders or input from large corporations and companies. You can also call it cronyism. I would even say like the crony capitalism. Again, like get the capitalism word out of there. Yeah, call it what it is. Is this super late stage, poorly run bureaucratic mess of a government that is just so enormously large that the only way to get anything done is to basically bribe the government by having an interest group, having a super PAC, and saying, hey, we kind of want this thing to happen. We kind of want to do this. And this enormous amount of regulation makes it completely impossible. We'd like to build a factory in this town. Is there any way you could maybe grease the wheels for us? Oh, well, absolutely, sure. I'm kind of a little bit light on my campaign funds. Oh, yeah. I really appreciate what you're doing. So maybe, I'll see what I can do.
Is that as capitalism works, the government figures out how to capture more and more of it. It leverages up as much debt with its central bank as it possibly can. We get 100% GDP to debt ratio, and then we spiral out of control. You are then you're spending more money on debt servicing than education or military defense. So you're just paying interest payments at that point, lots and lots of interest payments. And where we are right now is late stage government spending and government debt. And they all do it. They all overspend, over debt. 45% of the economy shouldn't be government spending. That's not a healthy way to be.
That's insane.
So we're in that zone there. There's something else that's happening at the moment, which is...
Can I just stop you there? So you explain that situation really beautifully. What does that mean for the average person on the street living in that type of society or that economic system where it's 100%?
Well, what it means is if you had a house and that house had credit card debts, and every single month you're earning money, but a lot of your money is going to the interest on the credit card, it's non-productive payments. Basically, you're paying money out, but you're not getting anything back from it because you're just paying the interest on the credit card. So we have a system.
Okay, so I mean, this does sound like it is very similar to what's in the U.S. I don't know what their debt deficit is in the UK, but I mean, like obviously the US, what is it, $37 trillion in debt, which is ridiculous and insane. But it is just like, you're basically saying, hey, how much, growth do we have? How much money can we leverage so that we can take in more debt and we can, build this stuff up, because it makes political sense for me in terms of, someone who wants to get elected, to spend more. I can give you free stuff. I can give you free stuff if you elect me. If you elect me, I'll give you some free stuff. And hey, can we pay for this? Well, I mean, no, not really. We could like borrow to do it. Okay, yeah, so we'll do that. I'll give you some free stuff. And that's where we're at right now, which is not a good thing. But I mean, it's bananas to be like, yeah, hey, literally the only thing you're doing with your tax money now is like paying the interest. It's completely insane. It's crazy how much money they want. It's bananas. It's completely insane.
Where the government is able to bring money forward from the future using a central bank, right? And they make a promise, and they basically say, we promise that if you give us this money now, we will indebt our citizens into the future, and forevermore they will have to service that debt. And we're hoping that...
And this is another thing that people, have mentioned before, where you're essentially like where they essentially want to... You're basically like, you're enriching the people who are, old now, and then you're stealing from the young people who are, going to have to pay this stuff down in the future, and they're not going to be able to. I meant you funny. Yeah, okay.
Bringing money back from the future, or from the future, we hope that we can spend it wisely so that creates growth, and it won't matter that the citizens are indebted, right? So what they're doing is they're basically just burdening future generations little bit by little bit. And that's great if you bring money back from the future and you spend it on something very productive. Right. If you build highways and bridges, and if you build schools and hospitals, and you basically build a society that's working, that was a smart decision to bring that money back now so that we can have those things now that create productivity in the future. And sure enough, let's say you bring 10 billion back from the future, you make a promise that we will service the debt, and then you spend it wisely, and then 10 billion is nothing because look at all the productivity gains we got, right? It was worth spending that money. It was worth that activity. Now, if you bring 10 billion from the future back here and you don't spend it wisely, too bad, so sad. You have to keep servicing that debt. So roughly speaking, government debt, let's say it's 5%, right? We now have 2 trillion worth of government.
All right. The UK debt to GDP ratio has hit 100% again, for the first time in 50 years. All right, so where is that? UK government debt as a percentage of GDP. Yikes. Okay, so basically they started... Yeah, so they started it in, I don't know, like 1921, roughly. It was at 150%. So this is like, I would say roughly after World War I. So they're still trying to recover. And then World War II hits, the government debt shoots up because obviously, it's wartime spending. And then you pop down, and then, it's just like, super, super, super low they're going, okay, we're trying to pay this off, we're trying to pay this off, we're trying to pay this off. And then, what is this? Roughly 2007. So probably this is like the 2008 crisis where it just pops up, it explodes, levels off a little bit, and then 2021, yeah, this is COVID, bang, bumps up again. Whew. Dang, dang, dang. That's pretty crazy.
Debt, that means we have 100 billion a
I
year
would love to be able
split
to
between all of our working people.
I see we got a Ruski in chat. I would love to be able
It has
to
to be paid, and it's just
read
interest. Right, we never pay it down.
Cyrillic
We
better.
never get rid of it. It's just
Pretty
interest
sure it
payments
says,
every single year. We'll be back with our guest in a minute.
No,
But
we will
first-
skip ahead. I'm not getting any money from this ad.
I suppose looking at it,
That's a lot,
if it
man.
was like a household, eventually it comes a point where you can no longer service the debt and you go bankrupt, you lose your assets. What does that mean for a country?
Well, countries can't die.
They can't.
What
Well-
happens with countries is that the difference with a household is we have to project based on the fact that you're going to get old and die. So that countries don't get old and die. Countries, with the way that
They migrate
if
it.
you go to the bank and you say, I want to take out a loan, they say, well, how much do you earn, right? And they look at your income. When we go to countries, they say, what's your population? How many people do you have? So what countries tend to do is they say, quick, get more people in, right? Let's let more people in. because
okay.
the central
That sounds familiar.
yeah, well, it would never happen in real world, right? But they basically say, when we go to the central bank, we need to show that our population's growing because the central bank calculation is how many people have you got and is your population growing? And if your population grows, what they do is really simple mathematics. They go, what is your GDP per capita? Right, and then what is your population? So they basically do their calculations on that. So the government, rather than dying, they bring people in. If they can't get product to them, they can sell stuff off. They can perpetually raise taxes to the point where it becomes totally oppressive, and there's
Holy
no
crap.
joy in the economy because we're just paying off this debt, and it
That
really
is
doesn't
insane.
change unless there's some massive change in productivity, or if the country,
Okay, so like I feel like I've heard I know I've heard this from like Constant Kissing before, where it's essentially like, the importing of people into the country makes, your GDP line go up. And I'm like, okay, I get that. The way that Constantine always put it was you essentially are doing that and it's like a political move. So that a politician can say, hey, look, I presided over GDP line goes up. And therefore you would elect me back again. But what this guy's saying, this Daniel Priestley guy is saying, hey, look, actually what's happening is, these politicians are doing this probably, yes, because they can, say, hey, we presided over GDP growth. But also it means that they can finance more debt from the central bank because we've got more people coming in. Ooh, that's a good explanation. Because I mean, certainly I have no problem believing that a politician would screw over their entire constituency just to get elected. And, they screw their entire constituency by saying, hey, look, we'll just bring in more people. I don't care if it affects anybody's lives. As long as it gets me elected and looks good for my stats, I'll do it. Totally 100%. I believe that. But if it's also a way for which they can, keep the government running, if they were to basically stop immigration coming in, that affects their government grift, essentially. They can't pay for as much stuff because they can't finance more debt from the central bank. And therefore all of their, money programs that line their pockets and their friends' pockets goes away. Ooh, that's a fantastic extra point. I'm glad we're watching this. Not the taxes.
It has to refinance its debts or something along those lines. But countries can't die. So in this new type of economics, you can just keep printing money, and hope for the best and see what happens.
But surely there will come a point where it becomes unsustainable. For instance, if you hit hyperinflation, for example.
They will, yeah. So there are countries where that happens, right? We've seen that socialist countries all the time have this collapsing moment where the currency goes out of control. So we've had a number of things that have happened over the last since World War II.
Okay,
we did a number of things that were a little bit interesting boosts to the economy or one-off tricks to the economy. So, for example, when the Blitz happened and everything was bombed, it was wise to then get everybody working to rebuild the country. So we had a productivity boom around rebuilding after the war. And that was good economically. Rebuilding activities like Dubai, they're putting buildings up, so it creates a lot of wealth. So we were doing that for a long time. Then we had a baby boom, and we had lots and lots of young people. And when you have lots and lots of young people, Beatlemania, we buy stuff, we invest in schools, we invest in infrastructure for that, right? So, and also you can forecast forward and say, oh, these people are going to be taxpayers soon, so we can borrow against what they're going to do. Then we did this thing of saying, okay, let's make sure women enter the workforce. And that means that every household has 2 taxpayers. So now we can actually, because women's labor was never taxed, so therefore it couldn't be taken into consideration for how much you could borrow. So we said, oh no, we've come up with these ability to tax women. So what we'll do is we'll now indebt women. So we can now double the amounts of money that we do because we've got female taxpayers.
And this actually, funnily enough, this kind of like pops into another video that we might end up having time to watch. But it's like the introduction of that, of women having, being in the workforce. And generally speaking, if you're going to be in the workforce, obviously women are also going to want to vote. And it does coincide. It coincides that, the women going into the workplace and therefore all of their stuff being taxed coincides with them getting, a political voice. Because you're generally speaking, you're not going to be like, yeah, if I'm a woman, if I'm being taxed for all my work, I want the ability to vote. Sure, that's great. That's totally understandable. But it does mean that, there's going to be, changes in political policy because now you have a whole new giant, segment of the population that you have to speak to on political matters. And this is even without mentioning the point that if all of a sudden you're now doubling the income of every household, well, all of these things that are household purchases like cars or houses, these types of things, essentially anybody who's selling these things can pretty quickly just about double the price of these things, which is why you see like house prices shoot up after women are getting into the workforce. It's because these are household purchases. You now have double the amount of money to spend. So of course, it feels like, hey, this house is going to cost me 5 years of salary. It's going to cost me 5 years of time to pay this off. Okay. Now, if I were to say, all right, we're going to double the price of this house. Okay, well, that means it's going to take me 10 years to pay this off. Damn, all right, that hurts. That hurts a lot more. Okay, well, I'll double it. It's still going to be 5 years because it's you and your wife. Okay, well, 5 years of us working. Okay, that's 5 years. It's no big deal. Yeah, it doesn't hurt the same. Like, obviously the number's bigger, and it is, it's more money, but it doesn't hurt the same because it's not extracting more time out of your, work life. You're spending the same amount of hours paying for it, even if it's distributed over 2 people.
And also, when it comes to buying a house, rather than saying we've got 12 paychecks per year, we've got 24 paychecks per year. So we can double the value of houses. We can leverage up the amount that it costs to buy a house. So we pulled all these levers as we went through. We then got productivity gains through technology. So, right, there's all this technology, but we started to do this terrible thing in the 70s where we said, actually, you know what? Let's just focus on this information technology, this intangible technology. All these people who do mining and production and manufacturing, we can do that really cheaply in China. Let's all go all in on moving all of that there. These people don't have jobs anymore. So we started to erode what we actually do internally. And here we are where we find ourselves today.
Well, the one thing that I think Francis, well, 2 things actually, I think that you made really good points, which I think we should delve deeper into. Is ultimately,
I feel bad for people. Yeah. I feel bad for people that could afford because of taxes. Yeah. It's not a good. I mean, it's not great.
I know you've debated Gary Stevenson, Gary's economics, and look, we can agree or disagree. He's become popular for a reason. There's no question about that, right? We first wanted to interview him when he was quite small, and in that time, he's really become quite significant commentator. And I think there is a reason for that, which is what Francis is talking about, which is ultimately for all the conversations we can have about, the top 1%,
couldn't afford the taxes.
tax.
For sure.
A lot of people, particularly since 2008, as you well know, GDP per capita hasn't recovered.
Hasn't moved,
right? People are not better off.
When is this? 2008. Like I said, there was the 2008 crisis where that stuff bumped. All right, and then actual GDP per head, and then obviously there's a huge dip around COVID. But then it's like, I mean, it's been totally flat since then. Like it recovers and it's like totally flat. Like it is still trending up, but obviously the crisis makes it dip. And obviously this only goes back to 92. So like if you were to go further back, there are other UK crises that would probably have the same dip. So this, like, post-war trend rate 2%. Yeah, like I get that this line from here from 92 to 2005, it looks like it would go right on, but you'd want to actually look further back. You'd want to map this out a little bit further. But certainly, yeah, I mean, there is a real legitimate stagnation in terms of GDP per capita in the UK.
The ordinary person is not better off. And in that situation, a lot of people's natural reaction is going to be, well, we've got to get the money from somewhere. Look at this guy with a massive house and 3 cars and 4 wives or whatever it is that rich people do. I don't know. Let's get some money from him. That's how we sort this out. Yeah. Right? Why isn't that?
Yeah. And I mean, they had a drop in 2020, COVID hit. Yeah, I mean, totally. And you would expect that. You would expect that GDP per capita to go down because, I mean, you stopped all economic activity. You said, hey, everybody's locked down. All the businesses are closed. Of course, that's going to drop. The thing is that, you can have a recovery after that. Like in the same way that this guy mentioned it, after the war, there's a war. Okay, like all your buildings are blown up. So all your businesses are blown up. Everything is destroyed. Everything is destroyed. You can have an era of rebuilding afterwards. And it makes sense to do so. And therefore, you would actually see a huge bump in, GDP per capita because all those people would be rebuilding all of those businesses. They'd be rebuilding all of the things, all of that type of stuff. After COVID, obviously, there's not necessarily as much physical rebuilding that has to happen, but you'd still have, you'd expect to see a boom after that. You'd expect to see, hey, after everybody's been locked up, been cooped up, you would expect people to come out of that and be spending a lot of money because, they want to pay for stuff. They want to be like, hey, I wasn't able to go to the gym. I wasn't able to eat out. I wasn't able to do any of this stuff. I want to do this more. So you would expect to see a jump, but you didn't see it in the UK. I feel like you did see it in the US a bit.
A good idea. Why can't we do that?
Where were you born?
I was born in the Soviet Union.
Soviet Union.
But look, just to steel man the argument, the Soviet Union was like, let's take everything from everybody and then redistribute everything. People are just talking, like right now, the Labour Party is discussing a wealth tax, right? Someone's got £10 million, an amount of money that's inconceivably large to almost everybody who lives in this country. If someone was to pay 2% tax on that, they're going, well, he's got 10 million, he pays 2% tax on that. Is that a big deal? Really?
This is when I had online school. I hated having it. That's interesting. I mean, I don't like the idea of online school. I don't think I'd be able to do it. Like, I don't think I'd be able to clock in every day if I wasn't like, if I didn't have the onus of like going to class physically, getting in my car, driving. I don't think I would do it. I think I would, because I've tried to do some online classes and stuff. I cannot stick with it. I don't think I'm cut out for it. And I think there's a lot of people like that. I think it's seriously, it's got to be damaging.
Well, it wouldn't even be 2% on that because they're saying a tax-free threshold of 10 million. You don't initially they're saying that you would have a 10 million wealth where it's not taxed, but it could eventually come down, and often does come down.
But do you see, just before you get, do you see why to an ordinary person? They're just like, it's hard to understand what the counter argument to that is, really.
No, look, simple sounding solutions are amazing, and they make you feel great.
They do.
You know, it's like anything. You just go, oh, how do I lose weight? Oh, just eat right and exercise. Okay, that sounds pretty cool, right? So it's like anything that's
I've tried it.
yeah, right. Yeah, the implementation
Bullshit.
is harder than the idea.
Right.
With all ideas, the implementation is a little bit harder than the idea. So there's a lot to unpack here. But look, there's a few things that are going on. The first things first is that Britain.
Sometimes I wouldn't log on. Would sleep in sometimes. I bet, man. I mean, it would be, yeah. Especially because it's like it should be so easy. Be like, oh, okay, like instead of I need an hour and a half to get ready, I've got to I got to fix myself breakfast because I can't eat at school. I need to get in my car. There could be traffic. I need to drive there. So I need to wake up an hour and a half, 2 hours before school starts. With just like logging on, it's like, okay, I can literally like 5 minutes. I can just be like 5 minutes, I'm good. And then I can wake up there. So like you hit the snooze button one time, you're screwed. And then you're like, all right, well, I'm already late. I might as well just not go. Yeah, there's no way it's good, man.
Is full of a lot of wealthy people who are from somewhere else, right? So they came here, they live in London, they might have a global empire, all of those sorts of things. When someone is from somewhere else, like myself, for example, you've got multiple passports, and you tend to, if you've ever lived around wealthy people, they live very differently to most people. I've also spent a lot of time around very wealthy people, and also
eat while you're on Zoom calls, for sure,
without a lot of wealth. Most wealthy people have a very different relationship to the world than people who don't have means. They often have multiple homes around the world. They often have multiple passports that they hold. So they're dual residents. They do already have houses elsewhere, and they run their businesses digitally, and they have teams of people around the world. So we've never had more mobility when it comes to being a wealthy person. If you run a business now, there's a chart that I had there which is basically shows that 90% of the value of your company is digital. It's all in the cloud. It's all digital, especially British companies. We don't manufacture physical things. People think about what is wealth and they go, oh, it's land and houses and all this sort of stuff. Land and houses ish, but actually most land and houses and stuff is as a result of having a big family business or having a big business that's
And I'll be totally honest, this was another point of mine that I was trying to make. I don't know how well I made it whenever I look at the Gary's economic stuff, which is, look, like all of these super wealthy, rich people, the stuff that's making them super rich and wealthy is their stock in their company. And trying to tax that and going, hey, we want 2% of this person's, company valuation. It's like, you can't do that, man. You can't hit this company that's like it's just like, it's crazy to be hitting these like capital gains taxes and these types of things. It's just like you're hitting stuff in such a way that it's going to blow up the valuation of all these things, and then they have to like cut them up to service them, and then like all these businesses fail, all these types of things. And and again, this is why I find the slogans of like tax the rich really unsatisfying and like naive and dangerous, because for some of those things I can understand having some degree of tax for certain assets that are finite. And again, I mean, I'm going to keep banging on about this point, which is like taxing land and property and these types of things. That's done elsewhere. Like, I mean, it's not this guy. Rory Sutherland mentioned it. Like, Texas does this. If you can buy land in Texas very cheaply, but you have to pay, I think it's like 2% every year of the land's value in taxes. So it's actually not a great hold of, value, because, you have to pay for it every year. So if you're not doing something with that land, if you're not developing it, then actually it's stupid to hold land, and therefore land prices are cheap. And, if you want to buy land to do something with it, you can afford it at a reasonable price. And in the UK, that's probably relatively reasonable. Obviously, there's way less land, so it is going to be more valuable, like per acre and these types of things. But like that kind of a thing is like reasonable, but it's such a small thing. It's such a small thing that it's like it's not, it doesn't have the same aspirational subscribe to my stuff, listen to me, I've got the solution, and things are going to be, horrible if you don't have this big giant, overarching plan. Like that's way more motivational to people than, hey, you know what? We're trying to get this small targeted initiative through Parliament. Because like that's something you could actually accomplish, and then you go, okay, well, we did that. Now what? And I'm like, well, now we're done. I was like, I think this guy does want like, like Gary Stevenson to me does seem like he wants some degree of like fame and influence because he's already got wealth. So it's like, what is the next thing after that people want? They tend to want like fame and influence and power and prestige. Yeah. And okay, my teacher would say, "Why are you eating pizza for breakfast?" Because I can. That's fair.
Empowering.
So most wealth is equity in a business.
Equity in a business, and that's the engine room of wealth, right? And also, we think about houses and buildings and land, but those houses, buildings, and lands are held by companies and trusts. So, for example, let's say I've got a couple of houses, and I put those in a company. If I go and move to Dubai, I can essentially make that company full of debt, and any surplus income I can pay it out as a director's fee. And living in Dubai, I don't have to pay income on that if I'm physically out of the country.
Ooh.
So yes, it would be very easy to say, oh, let's just tax the rich. The rich and entrepreneurs have a mindset of wanting to succeed, wanting to be proactive. I'll tell you what really makes the rich move. I'll tell you what really makes entrepreneurs move. It's the mindset of tax the rich more than anything else.
Yeah.
Because there is a mindset that in order to succeed, you have high agency, you get stuff done, you solve problems, and you get rewarded for that. And then there's a mindset that in order to succeed, you play the victim, you play your weaknesses, you downplay your strengths, you hide, and ultimately you're the enemy if you're doing well, right? So that mindset,
that is true.
This is an anti-wealth country, this is an anti-entrepreneurship country. I'm seeing a lot of people even just moving to other parts of the world that have similar taxes, but they're just not anti-rich. And they're just not
That is so incredibly true. People do that all the time. People legit, because I mean, like you think about like the U.S. The U.S. is more entrepreneurial. The U.S. has like significantly high taxes. Plus, if you are a U.S. citizen, you can have businesses all around the world. It doesn't matter. You're getting taxed. You can live in another country. You still get taxed. The U.S. does not care. You will still get taxed. So, I mean, yeah, it was like, but still people will move to the U.S. And it's actually very difficult for people like a nomad capitalist is kind of like a famous guy will say to, the U.S. people like, yeah, like, like move elsewhere, you go where you're treated best. If you're a U.S. citizen, you can do that and you can reduce your tax burden, a fair bit, but you're not like eliminating it. And the majority of the people who are U.S. citizens who, do end up trying to, reduce their tax burden never renounce their citizenship because they're like, no, I like being American because you know what? The mindset is, I mean, a little bit less so now, but there is still a reasonable thing of like, it's cool to be an entrepreneur. It's cool to make money. We like you to make money. We like you to be successful. That's a good thing. Yes. U.S. throws you taxes to pay.
Anti-wealth.
Well, quite a lot of states in America where you might want to live in, New York, California, I mean, they all have a bad rep for various reasons, but like people shouldn't get confused. Like there might be a lot of crime in New York and LA, but there's a lot of really nice places you could live in both of those states, right? And they have higher taxes than we do in Britain.
Oh, yeah.
They do not have that culture.
They don't have the culture of scratch the Ferrari versus celebrate the Ferrari. If they see, it's actually hilarious.
Cool.
In the USA, they love British brands. They love Rolls Royces, Bentleys, McLarens, all of these Range Rovers, all these British founded brands. They love those British brands. And if you turn up in a Rolls Royce somewhere in the USA, it's like, oh, that'll be me one day. I'm going to be successful. That person must have created an amazing business. I'm curious to learn how they did it. So there is that.
And this is like, you know, this plays into the thing that we mentioned before, which is why, like, the Communist Manifesto, Karl Marx, takes off in certain parts of the world, but like doesn't gain any traction in other places. And by other places, I mean the US. And Marx even said this himself, where he was like, yeah, look, the US is not involved in this. Whenever I say, like, hey, look, you know, the bourgeoisie, the proletariat are going to do these types of things, and it's completely 100% inevitable that these things happen. I don't mean the US. The US we're not going to talk about them because they've got social mobility, and, you know, they don't have a landed gentry class. They don't really have an aristocracy. They don't have a bourgeoisie. They have, you know, industrialists that make money, and, you know, people that are super, super poor can become, you know, owners of the means of production, and, you know, then lose it. And the owners of the means of production can lose it, you know, just through normal market forces. And therefore, you know, the US is immune to this kind of stuff. And yeah, I mean, you know, that's why that stuff doesn't take root as much. And in the same way, the anti-wealth stuff, don't get me wrong, there is a bubbling up of it now, because of sort of like, you know, like TikTok, champagne socialists, that, you know, get very famous for saying these types of things, because things are, you know, not going as well for a lot of people, and therefore, you know, they want something to blame, but they're still inherently, like, you know, you can have a champagne socialist. You can have people blow up and do really well, and people are not, people do not, like, you know, spit on Hassan for having money if they're a fan of his. Whereas, like, they kind of should if they were being principled.
That mindset in most of America. There's obviously pockets that aren't. But yeah, so plenty of people, when a country turns to the only way to succeed here is to essentially get money out of government. See, the thing about big government is, this is the other thing that's really important. A lot of people would say, oh, it's really greedy not to want to pay taxes. But a lot of wealthy people understand that big governments are just a feeding pool for companies, large companies, that figure out how to get money out of government.
Mm-hmm.
So it's no coincidence that our prison system is run by private equity, and a lot of our social care system is private equity backed, and a lot of our healthcare system is now private equity backed. And once you work in the world of money and wealth and business, you start to see, oh, these people work in government, and then they go and get a 600 grand a year job working for a PE firm, and they figure out how to go and take all the money out of government, and then they go and make all the profit over here. And actually, that's cronyism. And what big governments create is cronyism. They are essentially a monopoly on money, and anyone who's making any gets sucked into the government and redistributed to the PE firms who know how to hire ex-government employees and siphon the money off. So it's not necessarily, it could be greedy to say I don't want to pay taxes, or it could be incredibly patriotic. You could say this is not good for the country. This is not the direction. The economic freedom.
Now you see, like, this to me, just the theme of the message here is better. Obviously, I agree with this guy way more than I do a Gary Stevenson. Just inherently, you know, we can say that that's because of my personality. We can say that's because of my upbringing. We could say that's because of, you know, any number of things. I would say it's because of those things, plus reason and logic and history and, you know, rationale and, you know, economic literacy. This guy seems to have a much better grasp on all of those things, but also just purely on the basis of the feeling that is elicited by this is one of hope and optimism, as opposed to like pessimism and doomerism and you'll never get out of this. The only way out of this is through some magical, you know, government act that taxes the rich, and that's it. That's the only thing that can possibly do it. And we have to put all faith in, you know, some actor like that, as opposed to, yeah, you know what, you actually have the ability to rise above whatever circumstances you're in. And, you know, it's not going to be easy. And you know what? You're not guaranteed to succeed, but you actually do have a legitimate path and possibility for you to make a success of your life through your own effort and grit. It's just a better narrative to walk through life with, as opposed to, you know, the world is economic collapse and the rich are out to screw you, and the rich are so powerful that they'll never be defeated. Mm-hmm. They just want more money to be rich. Yeah.
Index says that what's good for the majority of people is economic freedom. That creates low poverty, high affluence for the majority of people. What's bad for people is big governments. Big governments create poverty. Big government, like it's almost like clockwork that you can actually see big governments getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Poverty's rising, 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 and then eventually the dam breaks, and they eventually cut right back. And guess what? It's good times again. So the countries that you would want to live in right now, they all have small governments, low crime, small government. And
okay, let's push back on that. People go, yeah, but what about Norway?
yeah, well, Norway, it has this amazing thing called a sovereign wealth fund. And I actually think it wouldn't be a bad idea to have sovereign wealth fund in the UK. So the sovereign wealth fund is where you say, okay, we've got some family silver called oil and gas. And actually, that belongs to the people of our country. So what
That's honestly horrible. What specifically? I mean, there's a little bit of a delay, so I can't say specifically what you're talking about when you say that's honestly horrible.
we're going to do is we're going to ring
I might
fence that
agree.
oil and
I'm not
gas
sure.
resource, and we're going to have other companies that we might charge a little, or sorry, we might allow them to earn a little bit of money through the processing and extraction, but ultimately the wealth stays with the country. So this is where you essentially build a sovereign wealth fund. The majority of why Norway works is that sovereign wealth fund. Like it literally creates such, I mean, it's something like, I mean, that sovereign wealth fund owns half of London, by the way. I don't know if you know this, but Norway and Qatar own more than the royal families combined. So two sovereign wealth funds, the Qatari sovereign wealth fund and the Norwegian sovereign wealth fund. We actually have 100 billion worth of natural gas under Lancashire. We could create a $100 billion sovereign wealth fund out of that. We also have the different parts of the North Sea. We could create a sovereign wealth fund. We do actually have all sorts of natural resources that the UK could access under the structure of a sovereign wealth fund. It wouldn't be a bad idea.
So I guess the question is, why don't we do that then?
We don't do a lot of smart things. There's a long list of really smart things that we don't do. I'm not against that. I just think.
Well, that would be net zero, I'm guessing, right?
Well, a big reason why we don't do it is because apparently it's a lot greener to produce steel in China and then ship it to the UK.
He's being sarcastic for our American listeners.
And it's also a lot greener if you get your natural gas from another place and you bring it here on a boat, as opposed to just bringing it out of your own ground. And it's also a lot better to get your natural gas from countries that don't have any standards around how they do natural gas, and to just ignore the fact that the UK could do it way better and cleaner with our British standards, as opposed to accepting whatever report our natural gas partners give us. So I mean, what's crazy is that somehow the green minded people, mind you, I'm a massive environmental. I love the environment. Yeah. I would love to protect as much of the environment as possible. I just think it's absolutely insane that we somehow think that it's better and more virtuous to do this stuff offshore, and that somehow impacts global temperatures for the better, right? So
yeah, and obviously that's not the case, as we're all aware. I mean, because look, the UK, the US, all of these, every Western nation could essentially go net zero tomorrow. It would affect global warming essentially zero, because the 80 to 90% of all the greenhouse gases, of all the emissions, all of those types of things are China and India. All of the pollution in the ocean is coming from China and India. It comes out of 3 rivers. The US has nothing to do with it. All of these things, which again, I'm I agree with him. Protecting the environment is a good thing. Obviously, yeah, we all want clean air. We all want clean water. But if you actually want clean air and clean water, and if you actually really super duper care about, global warming and these types of things, the West is not the person to be looking at. You need to be putting pressure on China and India and these other, emerging nations to, emerge industrially as quick as humanly possible so that they can move over to more advanced forms of energy. Okay, China and India, what, instead of burning coal, how about you burn natural gas? So just, just plow through, get rid of your coal plants, do natural gas. Natural gas is way cleaner than coal. And while you're doing natural gas, be building up nuclear technology, okay? Because nuclear technology is even cleaner. Yeah, like if you take India and China and make them go nuclear energy, global warming is done. It's finished. It's over. Ugh. It's insane, dude. Yeah, but I mean, yeah, he's just absolutely annihilating. He's just roasting him in the classic British fashion. It's hilarious.
Silly stuff. Anyway, but yeah, that's one of the main reasons why we don't do it.
So you touched on economic freedom, and I find this concept quite interesting, actually. So let's delve into it. First of all, what do you mean by economic freedom, and actually, what are the benefits of it?
So economic freedom, essentially, as a big picture, you've got state top-down control, where a controlled economy is that the government is making most decisions and really dictating how money gets spent in the economy. And then you've got economic freedom, which is individuals make decisions about their own lives and they get on with making their own life. If they want to buy a car, they buy a car. If they want to start a business, they can start a business. Now, there are certain things the state should do to protect economic freedom, like rule of law, policing, fast court access to justice, right? All of those types of things are associated with economic freedom, and they're state-run things, right? So there's definitely a huge role for the state to protect economic freedom. But then there's this crossing the line, and you say, oh, wait a second, we're going to get out of the business of like creating a good playing field. We're going to get in the business of actually telling people how to live their...
Yeah, and you're telling people how to live their lives, plus you're picking winners and losers. Now, here's the thing. Maybe there's an argument for the government picking winners and losers. If they do a good job at it, maybe it helps some people out. The problem is that if you can pick winners and losers in economic matters, the incentive to pick your mate, to pick your buddy, who, guess what, might throw you a little bit of a kickback here and there, he might buy your kids a house or something like that, it's just, people cannot turn it down, Like, I mean, this is the Nancy Pelosi version of picking winners and losers. It just so happens that her husband is incredible. He beats the market every time. He does better than Warren Buffett, better than every stock investor of all time. He's got an incredible record. And it just so happens that his wife is, like on committees that pick who the winners and losers of certain, economic games are going to be. And that's who they invest in. It's completely, obviously, there's no, nothing bad happening there. There's certainly nothing untoward happening with him, winning in the stock market this amount. But, some other person might be greedy and might, use that for their own personal enrichment. I don't know.
Their lives and how to spend their money and all that sort of stuff. So as you get bigger and bigger governments and more state control, you erode economic freedom. And then essentially you go from like 1 to 4% poverty rates to 25% poverty rates.
Wow.
Right. And it's almost as predictable as clockwork, right? As you go this way, right? And and the reason I say that is there are actually countries that have become more economic free. They've pushed for economic freedom, and poverty rates have dropped and affluence has gone up. And then there's affluent countries that have gone this way and gone towards socialism, and poverty goes up. The UK is a classic example. When I arrived here in 2006, it was extremely high on the Economic Freedom Index, and it was one of the best places in the world. Everyone was coming here. Entrepreneurs were coming here. It was just one of the best places you could possibly be, and the entrepreneur hub of the world was London. And then in the global financial crisis, we implemented all sorts of rules and regulations and higher taxes. And
it's like those memes I've made saying, Jimmy, stop wasting more taxes. We need money to pay the bills. For real, man.
All of these kind of things, and we brought Economic Freedom Index, I think, from like early 80s down to 70s, right? And then today we're in the 60s. So as our economic freedom has been eroded in the last 20 years, we've just seen rising poverty, right? Lower affluence, wider inequality. So I just blame government for that stuff. I just see it it seems counterintuitive, But the more money you give to government, the more inequality and more poverty and all this sort of stuff. Big governments, anyone who has come from.
Now, here's the thing. He said inequality. Now, the inequality thing might be true. I don't know. But the thing that he does mention that is definitely true is the poverty rates. The thing is that a lot of people focus on inequality. And they go, hey, look, we've got this giant inequality divide. Now, let's say that we do have a giant inequality divide. That could be bad. It could be bad. But it also could be like, you know what? It's actually not that bad, because what's happening is that, poor people are getting richer, but they're getting less rich than the super, super, super wealthy. So the divide is way bigger, but the poor people are actually doing way better. Now every, poor person owns a house, every poor person owns, like a phone, a computer, all kinds of luxury goods. They're doing way better. And all of their material goods are, way better off. It's just that, the super duper mega rich are even super duper 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 mega dega rich. And, it's a lot of people will go, oh God, like the disparity between these people is enormous and it's huge. It's growing. Okay, yeah, but would you rather have everybody be equally like poor and destitute and awful and go, hey, look, the inequality is super, super small. Everybody is starving to death. The richest person on the planet not in the planet, but in this society cannot afford a loaf of bread. And, the poorest person is like right there neck and neck with them, also can't even afford a slice of bread. Okay, so they're both starving to death, but the wealth inequality is really low. I know which one I'd rather live in, for sure. I'd rather be in the place where I can be, relatively poor, but I'm not, I don't have the likelihood of like starving to death because I can't afford anything, because the poverty rate's incredibly low, and that's what happens here. But people always love to, focus on wealth inequality because it engenders more a spirit of like vengeance, of justice, of fairness, because, people should not be doing that much better than me. I work hard, right? There's a real feeling of like injustice if there's an incredible amount of inequality, which is also, a societal factor that we do need to take into account. But I feel like it's addressable with, just the general idea of like, entrepreneurship. If you're celebrating that, if you're looking at somebody who's done really well and you go, ooh, that's aspirational, as opposed to that's evil, it kind of solves the problem.
Eastern European countries, Soviet Union, you know that state-run big government just doesn't work. People are lining up for bread, and then in free markets, there's just so much abundance. You see these images of people who come from socialist countries, and then they go into a Costco. They just can't believe their eyes, like how much abundance there is, right? So free markets produce abundance. Top-down state control creates poverty.
Let me introduce you to the people I work with to protect my family against financial instability.
Chess has got
I'm not making any money on
flaws,
the
a lot of
ads.
problems. But I'd rather live in the UK where there is an NHS as opposed to America where I'm just going to pluck a figure at random. It's cost 30 grand if you break your leg, for example.
I tend to agree. Like I tend to agree that there's plenty of stuff. Like I think there's a role of the state to try and protect the game that we're playing. Like, for example, investing into good schools means that you have productive citizens later on. It's a good investment. You can see that investment's going to go in a good direction.
Okay.
I can also see that if someone is injured or
Bro got skipped. He did got skipped. But then I will have to. All right. So I thought he would maybe mention this. I mean, like, look, investing in schools is great, and I totally agree with it. The problem is the government-run schools in the U.S., maybe in the UK it's a little bit different, but in the U.S. the public school system does not do a good job at educating people. It if anything, it does a pretty horrible, terribly poor job at doing it, which is why the idea of school choice is actually like super popular amongst people, because they can see that, if you've got competition between schools, they get better educated. And I mean, again, if you wanted to invest in that, you could do it in such a way that would foster competition and would foster, you know, a greater return on your investment by simply just saying, okay, you know, every kid in America gets, you know, $10,000 from the government to whatever school they want to go to. And therefore, you know, parents can decide, okay, yeah, we'd rather have them go to this school. This school has a better math and science program. This school, you know what, like religion is very important to us. This one has, you know, a very specific, religions studies aspect. So we'll do that. We think that that kind of an education's important. But that's just, you know, it's not a thing, man. Not in school you graduated. Cool.
It's in everyone's interest to make sure that they heal and that they're back, you know, and all of that sort of stuff. So I think there's definitely
an argument for that.
There's definitely things the government should have a monopoly on, and you know, like emergency care and ambulances and all of that sort of stuff. I think it's. You know, I agree. Like the American system, where calling an ambulance could wind you up bankrupt, seems pretty heartless and seems unnecessarily harmful. You know, it makes sense to have ambulances. One of the issues that we have is that in order to have these systems work, you almost have to have a culture within the country that I will only draw on the system as a means of last resort, right? Like there has to be that. Like, you know, you look at post-World War II Britain, even people who had lost legs in the war felt that it was their responsibility to find a job and get to work and do
Religious
something.
too.
There was this kind of like,
believe in God.
It's the last resort to go and be on benefits. Like, you know, it's a safety net, but it's not a hammock. You can't hang out there. It's not a way of life. It's not a multi-generational family thing. We use this as a means of last resort and nothing more than that. If you have that culture,
and that's totally interesting. The phrasing it as a cultural aspect is probably like that's probably accurate. The problem is that, you know, the human desire to sort of get something for nothing is really, really strong, and therefore there's always going to be an enormous amount of people that will, you know, glom onto it and will take it. And there's also the aspect of it which is like, you know, if these things exist, you know, they're going to attract people that like perhaps otherwise they wouldn't. And a lot of people are going to end up trapped in it because they can be. Like it's too tantalizing an offer to get something for nothing. And you're going to basically grab a lot of people that otherwise would be happy to not mooch off the system. And they go, oh, you know, like they would otherwise be productive members of society. They would not be, you know, just doing everything they possibly can to grift. But if the grift is like really good, if it's really attractive, you're going to convert some of those people into, you know, leeches. Just because it's like you can't get away from how good it feels to get something for nothing. And I mean, there's absolutely an understandable argument for, you know, healthcare and these types of things. The problem is that, you know, again, I don't know if the government's the person to do it because I don't know if they do a good job with it. And then we also do have in the U.S., like a lot of people will say that the U.S. healthcare system is terrible. I'm not sure if that's entirely the fault of like the healthcare insurance companies and how much of it is also a result of like, you know, Medicare coming in to play, and that like it skews hospital costs. It skews all of those costs an enormous amount. And it also makes it like kind of impossible to figure out how much things cost. And it's just a very weird system to have that stuff in there. We've kind of got, a lot of people say we've got like the worst of all systems. We've got like, yeah, like we just have kind of like the worst of all systems. We took like the worst parts of, you know, the British national healthcare system of like, okay, we're going to have government involvement in, you know, healthcare and these types of things, which is going to make, you know, prices get like very strange and inflated and these types of things. And it's also going to make them not work as well. But then we're also going to have this profit-driven, this type of stuff. So like things are now super expensive, and it's just a very, very odd system.
Culture, then all of these social systems work. But if you have a culture where you go, oh, actually, it's a benefit. Oh, like, oh, that's a benefit of a citizenship. I wouldn't mind that benefit. What other benefits are you offering, right? You know, hey, actually, why would I work when I could hang out and just get paid the same anyway? You know, we have this enormous number of people in the UK. I think it's like 25% of people under 35 are on benefits. 51% of households are on more benefits than they collect, than they earn. So we now have this situation where one way to win in this economy is to play the victim. You know, we have there's this video that I saw. There's a video I saw on YouTube, and basically this crow had crashed into the glass, and the owner of the house had given some milk and bread to the crow, right? So this crow had been given free food, and then these 3 other crows flew to the glass, lay on their backs, and looked like they'd crashed into the glass.
Oh my God.
Because they'd witnessed that you get free milk and bread if you play the victim.
Oh my God, that is awesome.
Look, I'm not at all criticizing someone who has genuine reasons that they need state support, but we have actually gotten to the point where a lot of people have figured out, oh, easiest way to get a BMW, I'm gonna play this little system over here. There are websites dedicated to telling you what to say in order to get certain benefits, and we can see this in the charts of how much benefits get paid for certain things. You can see that these schemes come in at like $1 billion, $2 billion a year, and then they're 8 billion, then they're 12 billion. I think 1 in 5 new cars in the country is now part of the mobility scheme. You know, like, I'm not saying some people don't need state support. I'm definitely not saying that. In fact, you want to protect it because you want the people who need it to have as much as possible. You don't want to have a situation where it's being abused by people who don't really need it, because then people who genuinely need it, you know, they don't have as much to access.
Right.
Or there's not.
And I mean, the other aspect of this is if those things are kept small, if those programs are kept small, and, you know, the people who, and it's only servicing the people that really need it, the people who are administrating that in the government, they can be put out of a job very easily, where it's like, okay, yeah, we gave this to everybody that needed it. Okay, well, we're going to eliminate your department then, because you're done. You're good. We got it. We solved it. Ooh, actually, you know what? There's actually a couple more people that need it. And actually, you know what? We need more people. We're going to need more people because there's so many people coming in. We need so much more money, because all these new people need cars and these types of things. It's incredible. It's just, you know, it is this thing of like, you know, he's right. You know, the government needs to be, you know, smaller if you actually want to succeed. Now, you know, is there a perfect balancing point between, you know, keeping government small and therefore effective and allowing for economic freedom and, you know, earning potential and possibilities in these things while retaining a lot of social services? Probably not. There probably is, like, you have to decide on which side you want to be. And it's like, okay, for my money, you'd probably lean towards, you know, less social services and keeping government small and effective, because that, you know, that's probably going to be long-term better off. But, you know, it's always just easier to get elected if you promise free stuff. So it's very difficult to keep that, you know, it's very difficult to keep that the case. And it usually ends up in these cycles of, like, you know, boom and bust.
Not enough to do with for other things that we need to do in the country as well.
Well, we had Fraser Nelson on to talk about this, to talk about the issues with the benefit system. And one of the things, you know, you mentioned that people need to have a really good reason, but I think it's also a self-fulfilling thing as well, because let's say you've got 3 friends, and one of them's a bit anxious and another one's a bit depressed, and you might not have the job of your life, your life circumstances might not be great. Well, I've been there, and I don't remember like being joyous in that moment, right? Now, if your mates who are slightly anxious and slightly depressed are on benefits because they're depressed and anxious, well, you go, well, I'm a bit depressed, I'm a bit anxious, and they are getting these things. So why, if that's what's available, why wouldn't I claim it?
Yeah, absolutely. It does happen like that. I remember when I was at university in Australia and all my friends were getting $1,500 a month on this particular student benefit. I just felt very wrong about it. I just didn't want to do it, but I was feeling like, oh, you know, I'm entitled to it. I really wrestled with it because I have this personally, at that age, I had this belief of if I can't afford to be at university, I'll quit. I did quit and I couldn't afford to be there. I was working 4 jobs and living on a concrete floor, on a mattress on a concrete floor in a shed in a garage. So, you know, but I just didn't want to take state benefits. I didn't feel like I was entitled to it. But I certainly thought about it because all my friends were getting it.
Right. And it creates this vicious cycle. And the difficulties politically, it's very difficult to deal with because once people are used to something,
taken into ways.
We now have multi-generational, like literally, where kids whose parents and grandparents have never worked, and that just means that's game over. Like, how do you break that cycle?
Right. Well, exactly. And if you talk about entrepreneurs,
and I mean that's the whole point. Is like, you know, you can't. The only way you can break that cycle is to break it. Is to basically say, all right, well, these are not it's not an option anymore. You can't take care of this system anymore because you're just, you know what, the system's gone. We broke it.
Entrepreneurship. I do think entrepreneurs, I'm guessing, are quite different to most people in the way their brain works, the way they look at the world.
Yeah.
Right? Is that fair to say?
Freedom. Right, the desire for freedom is a big thing. Agency, personal agency. I want to make my own way. Delayed gratification. I want to do something that's hard now in exchange for some sort of payoff into the future.
Yeah.
The understanding of fair exchange. I'm going to have to do something that you want to do in exchange for you to give me the money that I want. Right. So it's that whole, how do we build something fair exchange? Environment dictates performance. I have witnessed people who, like I do a bit of work in prisons, and in particular, I do a Dragon's Den experience in prison, where we get ex-offenders or offenders to come up with business ideas. And in exchange for, we don't have money, we have books, right? So we have all these business books that we take in there and we give business books to these guys. And in many cases, by the way, some of these guys have run 7-figure businesses in the past.
Right.
They're in prison,
amazing 24 hours a day customer service. All sorts of things that...
Quality product.
Building big teams of people who are out working all the time.
Oh, yeah.
So some of these guys, you know, they really naturally gravitate towards entrepreneurship. But what's interesting is that I watch the power of the environment, that you can get some people who are very negative about their situation, and as soon as we just introduce the idea of what business do you want to start when you get out of prison, and what, you know, and one of them will come up with an idea, oh, I want to do this, and then suddenly another one goes, oh yeah, I want to do a landscape gardening business, I want to do like a Mexican food restaurant, okay, I want to do, you know, I want to do this. I've been thinking about starting a clothing line. I've been thinking about doing that. And then suddenly, like popcorn, it all just starts popping off. And the energy in the room just lifts. And you see it go from like a weird, like we always start out in a bit of a circle and everyone's a bit quiet and not sharing their ideas. And then suddenly it's like this vibrancy pops in. So I do really have hope that for a lot, especially young people, show them that you actually can be successful, and there's that, just suddenly there's this like liftoff moment with energetically. It's important to say it's the greatest time in history to be an entrepreneur. There's never been a better time. There's more money available than ever before. The technology is freely available. You can build teams remotely. All the technology that you need is lying around the house. You know, it's true. There's bigger markets than ever before. You can sell into all sorts of markets. Like it's just this glorious time for entrepreneurship. Like it's the best time ever. And I've been an entrepreneur for 20-something years. Like this is the moment where like everyone's been. If you're even just slightly entrepreneurial, this is the most incredible time. Easier than ever. The only thing is that entrepreneurs want to be in a country that's positive.
You know, I love that you say that, because you hear this kind of doom and gloom narrative about country, about late stage capitalism, etc., etc.
I hate it.
And look, conditions are never going to be optimal, But that doesn't mean that you should not chase your dream. It's always going to be tough, and whatever reason. If the economy's booming, there's loads of competition. If the economy's not doing great, it's going to be harder to raise capital.
So true, so true.
Mm-hmm.
There's actually hard things about good economies, and there's good things about bad economies.
Yeah.
Entrepreneurs, you know, there's this mindset of let's play the hand that we're dealt, right? So, you know, you've dealt me some cards, let me play that hand. And that's a really positive mindset. You know, I've got this incredible friend of mine who's a quadruple amputee. And he's gone off and built a 7-figure chain of clinics that do rehabilitation. And he's amazing. He's literally built this incredible global destination for amputees to come and rehabilitate. Yikes. And he's a quadruple amputee. He runs an amazing business with dozens of employees, 7-figure revenue. He's in Brazil.
That's crazy.
And, you know, he literally was amputated above the elbow and above the knees on all 4 limbs.
Man, that's crazy.
But he said, okay, this is the hand I've been dealt. Can't change it. How do I play this hand?
Yeah, I was gonna say there has to be a bunch of jokes about hands. Yeah. Oh, he got a leg up.
Sorry, Pedro.
We have to.
And the answer is you build a new hand.
You build, yeah, exactly, right. Build it up. So, you know, the thing I love about entrepreneurs is that they often turn problems into opportunities. You know, my personal first experience as an entrepreneur was in my house when I was 10 years old. There was a small house fire. Flames leapt up onto the curtains. And there was smoke damage, and the fire went through a few of the cupboards and all this sort of stuff.
Okay.
And it was insured, but my parents were going to throw away the microwave and the fridge and a few of the things that got damaged. And I said, hey, what if I clean these things and I sell them? I was 10 years old. Don't know where I came up with the idea, but I said, oh, what if I clean these things and I sell them? If you want to, but you got to do it quick. So I got to work and I cleaned it up, and following weekend ran a garage sale. I went to the neighbors and they got stuff and they put stuff in my garage sale on a 50-50 joint venture. And at 10 years old, I had my first experience of just like turning a negative experience into a positive experience by selling stuff. And, you know, there was this magic moment where this guy comes up and he says, how much for the microwave? And I say, oh, it's $10. And he says, I'll give you $5 for it. I was saying, oh no, it's $10. He goes, I want to talk to your dad. Dad comes out and he says, oh, I want to bargain with you on the microwave. And he says, well, it's his business. You need to negotiate with him. It's like, wow, right?
Yeah.
But imagine if my parents had have said, oh, you can clean and sell all that stuff, but we keep the money.
So we keep 50% of the money.
Yeah, well, 60%, 70%, right? We'll keep all the money, right? We'll keep the majority of the money. I'm going to sit there and go, oh, okay. Well, under that circumstance, I'll just wait to get toys at Christmas. I'll just wait for mummy and daddy to give me the things. Right? So if you take away the rewards,
very true,
the entrepreneurship just doesn't happen.
But it's such an obvious thing because the government, it's a weird thing with tax because people instinctively know that the government is always trying to put a sugar tax, an excise duty on petrol. It's constantly trying to disincentivize things by making them more expensive.
This is it.
But they don't seem to understand that when you put a tax on work, on jobs, on employment, you also disincentivize those things as well. So you disincentivize, you make it less appealing for people to create jobs, to do jobs, to work hard. And to create businesses.
There's something called second-order consequences, and a lot of people don't understand this idea of second-order consequences or unintended consequences. So if we had a tax on long hair, and we said if your hair is below a certain threshold, then you have to pay more tax to have long hair.
All the Conservatives are applauding you right now.
I'm in favour of that for men only.
Right, exactly.
So, of course, what you would see is people will alter their behaviour. The vast majority of people will make sure that their hair is not longer than that threshold, so that they don't pay extra taxes. Some people, small percentage of people, might grow their hair out as a statement of like, look how rich I am, I don't care, right? So you get a small bit of flaunting it. But the vast majority of people are going to, in some way, it's going to have consequences. There will be second-order consequences. Now, what economists tend to do, which is so stupid, is they go, oh, how many people out there have long hair? Oh, there's 5 million people with long hair. Okay, well then if we just tax all of them 10 pounds, then we end up with this much money. And they create a calculation that doesn't include second-order consequences. So it's this stupid thing of like, how many people times this amount, this is how much we'll collect. And then they go, oh, wait a second, what just happened? Everyone cut their hair. Of course everyone cut their hair because you taxed it.
And I mean, this is not new. This is like I think, is it Sweden? Whatever country ABBA's from did this, where an enormous amount of people, they did a crazy, 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 huge, giant thing. And, they had insane amounts of taxes, right? But they basically, because the taxes were so crazy and huge and ridiculous, there were a whole bunch of like exceptions. There were a whole bunch of things that would give you like a tax break. One of the things was if you dressed like a crazy person, if you dressed in a manner that no normal person would dress, you got a tax break. That's why if you look at ABBA, all of their outfits are lunatic, like super colorful, weird, insane outfits. They did that for a tax break, okay? And the thing is, everybody did it. Everybody in that country did all of these things. So like they had huge, giant, enormous taxes on paper. But the amount of money that they actually collected was way less because everyone took advantage of all of these, tax breaks. They took advantage of all of these schemes to not pay their taxes because they were like, yeah, this is way easier than, just like working harder so that I have more money in the bank. It's like, no. I'm going to wear weird clothes. I'm going to say that, I'm living with, 4 family members, like all kinds of like just weird, whatever tax schemes so that they could get out of it. And it's like, it's silly to think that, people are not going to take advantage of these things. They're not going to do this. It's like people want to keep a hold of their money. If they think they're getting something out of it, they'll part with it reluctantly, but they'll do it. But if it's just like, I'm not getting anything, like, yeah, like, okay, the city where I'm living is like a crime-ridden crap hole. Am I going to give you as all the money that I possibly can? No, I'm going to do everything I can to keep a hold of it.
So this idea, like in Spain, they came up with a whole bunch of taxes or taxes and regulations if you had long-term tenants, right? And they said any tenancy above 12 months, it triggers all of these additional taxes and regulations. So guess what?
Now it's kicking out their tenants, I'm guessing.
In Spain, you can only get 11-month lease, right? You can rent a place for 11 months, you can't get a 12-month lease, right? And then they have all these under the table things where you have to, they have 2 houses with 2 different things and you have to swap houses every 11 months, right?
It's the most Spanish thing I've ever heard. Well, Daniel, the thing is, you are a very optimistic natural guy. It's why you do what you do. But I read this quote and I genuinely thought that it sounded true to me, which doesn't mean it is true, but it did worry me. I can't remember whose quote it is, but there's basically a guy, I think he might have been part of the Scottish Enlightenment, I should really have looked this up, but it was basically the idea that democracy can never last forever because once people work...
Unknown author? Is he actually unknown? All right. Democracy cannot exist as a permanent form of government. It can only exist until the voters discover that they can vote themselves largesse from the public treasury. Yeah, that's true.
Like how that they can vote to be paid more money by someone else. It just you don't come back from that.
Yeah,
it's sort of starting to feel like that to me.
Unfortunately, we're now at, I think 52% of households receive more in government benefits than they pay in taxes. Now, what happens when you cross that threshold is that democracy starts to be this compounding.
But it's also about culture, like you said before, because...
It is.
Look, I don't think I've ever been in a position where I've taken more out of the system than I've paid in, but I've been not very wealthy for all my life, basically, until we started.
Just quickly on that, you probably, in those times, the government was probably spending 18 grand per person.
Yeah,
and you weren't paying 18 grand, so you were getting more out of the system than
theoretically. But I was young and healthy, not using the NHS.
I get it.
Didn't have kids,
I get it.
But let's even say that, right? I never thought that. Well, we need to raise taxes on people who are doing well even more.
Yeah,
and partly it's because I kind of always thought that I would also do well.
I think that's a huge piece.
Partly also, it doesn't, like, what I mean about culture is, if there's a culture of like shared responsibility, like what we've got to do is like really make the right decision for the country as opposed to for me. And I think we've transitioned very much.
Oh yeah, this is actually a super cool idea. And this is being kind of bandied about in some circles, like Tim Pool, if you know Tim Pool at all. I'm sure you probably know Tim Pool if you're watching this, but he's basically saying, you know what, we need a system where in which people are elected, and they are, maybe not even elected, but like everybody who has a vote, everybody who can have some sort of impact on the system and other people need to basically be vetted. You don't get the vote just because you exist in the system. You get a vote if you have proven that you are willing to put the values or the welfare of society or other people above your own. That's kind of like what you need. And a lot of people say like it's Starship Troopers, but a lot of people don't totally understand the reference because it's about the book, not the movie. But like it's a legitimate concern. It's a real thing that I think makes a lot of sense. I don't know if we'd ever get it done because I mean, again, most people would essentially not be able to vote if that were the case. I think our society would be better if it were the case, but you would have to figure out like a way in which to test people.
Into that mentality, which is what's the right system for me only. Like I am in favor of paying this might be controversial with people, especially people who do well. I am happy with the tax burden as it is in Britain now. We're doing reasonably well. I'm happy to pay 40% tax if I felt that it was well spent.
There you go.
Bloody isn't.
That's the main thing. Yep.
And also, if I didn't feel like it was just putting taxes further and further up was a way of solving the problems that we're actually should be talking about, which is lack of productivity, which is net zero, which is we're not generating enough of our own revenue, which mass low-skilled immigration that's not productive, all of these other things.
And actually, I'm gonna pause for just a second here because I want to check this sovereign wealth fund. I want to see what this sovereign wealth fund thing is. All right, because he mentioned this as the thing that works about Norway. All right, is a state-owned investment fund that invests in real and financial assets such as stocks, bonds, real estate, precious metals, or in alternative investments such as private equity funds or hedge funds. Sovereign wealth funds invest globally. Most SWFs are funded by revenues from commodity exports or from foreign exchange reserves held by the central bank. Okay, so this would be what he was saying. He's like, hey, we could, basically take the, $100 million or $100 billion of coal or whatever, natural gas, something like that. And we could essentially say, hey, we'll borrow $100 billion in, loans, and then we'll take that and we'll invest that in stocks and bonds and blah, 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 that type of stuff. That actually means that's reasonable. Okay.
Is that the culture is now such that people are so incentivized to only really think about what's good for them.
At all ends of the spectrum.
At all ends of the spectrum.
Right. So,
because I also don't want us to be Dubai. I don't want 0% tax. I don't think that works for a country like Britain. Did you know that saffron has been shown in human studies to help you fall asleep faster, stay asleep longer, and first order?
Low-tax countries tend to do quite well. And also, Dubai has got plenty of police, amazing hospitals.
Yep.
It's got all sorts of other ways of raising money through properties, through Dubai's system is when you interact, you pay a lot, right? So if you rent a big house, you're paying a lot of tax on that. If you buy something, you're paying tax on that. So they tax the wealthy through interacting with their system, but there's a very low default. Like there's I mean, this country actually for a long time didn't have high taxes either, and we did really well. We booming, one of the best countries in the world.
And this is where Constantine and Francis's liberals coming out, where they really they like the idea of a tax and spend government. They are liberal. They are left leaning. They do actually have that as a thing. They're just, unfortunately, they're, in a country where they're being confronted with the negative consequences of that, the eventuality of that, which is, government mismanagement. the bureaucracy becomes, in service to the bureaucracy as opposed to the people, and therefore, it just doesn't work well. And but there's a lot of people that are still just kind of like ideologically for it, even when they're like, yeah, well, but like you voted for this, you don't like it now, and you've got a lower tolerance than other people for the shenanigans that go on. But like this is the result of the things that you say you want. So you're getting it
without having a lot of taxes.
It's just bad.
Same as the USA. The USA did incredibly well without a lot of taxes. So there are ways to do it. What you really want is you want great services and you want this. One thing that you may start to object to is this idea of the wealth tax. Right? And the reason for that is if we take trigonometry, I bet I could get a team of very smart people to build a case as to why your business is worth 25 million. And the reason we could do that...
Really? Who wants to buy it? Whoever wants to buy it for 25 million, it's sold. Bring it on. Your point is something else, though. I see where you're going.
Well, the reason I can do this is I can say you've got 1.4 million subscribers on the YouTube channel, and we can extrapolate. Well, Mr. Beast said that he would sell his business for $1 billion if this happened. And
I think it's 10 billion, but whatever.
Transactions. We could find a particular magazine that had 1.4 million subscribers, and we could say, oh well, let's extrapolate that over here. There's a lot you can do with theoretical valuations.
Oh yeah.
I can also do a big forecast and say, this is what we intend to do. We're going to launch these products and we're going to sell this many to this number of people. So we do an economic forecast. I could probably get some investors, if we pitched it well enough, to say, okay, we'll put in 2.5 million to make that happen, right, for 10%. So they would be buying into the big future direction. However, on paper, you've got a 25 million business. Now imagine what that would do if suddenly you had to start paying 2% every single year on this theoretical valuation. So you've raised money once, you haven't raised money again, but now you've got this 25 million valuation. You've got to pay 2% of 15 million. So you've basically just you've just created this additional tax burden.
So that's what, 300 grand a year?
Yeah.
Right, taxation is theft.
There you go.
So now you've got it. Right?
No, but that would destroy our business.
You destroy
the business wouldn't exist if we had to do
and
that.
Now, imagine magic wand scenario. All you have to do is register the business somewhere else.
Which is what we would do in that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie. If it came to that, we would either have to shut the business or move somewhere else. That's just a fact.
Now, let's also imagine a realistic scenario. You go to investors, and the investors are big-minded global people, and they say, oh, by the way, UK is not a good place to register your business. We want to invest, but we want you to set up in Delaware. We want this to be a Delaware corporation. Or we'd like you to set this up in Abu Dhabi. And you go, okay, 2.5 million invested, we just set it up in Abu Dhabi. Now, this is the problem. If trigonometry somehow, let's say, I'll give you a real life example. This is a real life example. Yesterday I was talking about a strategic partnership with a US company, and part of the strategic partnership was access to big distribution, and part of it was a little bit of money, skin in the game, and it would have been, if we do it, it would be 500 grand of cash at a 50 million valuation on one of my businesses, and then...
All right, I'm not really sure what the 500,000 to 50 million valuation, whatever, okay.
Access to the distribution gets them a little bit of extra equity if they hit certain targets. So we're saying 500 grand to get you in so that you're committed, and then another 500 grand for this target, another 500 grand for this target. So we're structuring a strategic partnership to grow into the USA. Now in that situation, that little tiny 500 grand strategic capital to get them to commit to the strategic partnership triggers 50 million, right? 40 million above, right? So now we've got 2% of 40 million. We have to now have 800,000 a year worth of taxes for that particular.
That's insane. They can't do that, surely, Daniel.
That's what wealth taxes is. It's a tax on unrealized gains.
But that's
the whole point.
Just going to ruin everything.
Do you know in the Nordic countries they tax musicians' music catalogs if they believe the music catalog is worth something? So they actually say, oh, you're a famous musician, Ed Sheeran. Oh, we're not just going to tax you on the 30 million you made that is real, that's actual real money. We're going to say that based on that 30 million, we value your catalog at 200 million. We want 2% of that 200 million as well.
But we already did that in the 70s, and all our rock stars left.
They all left. The Beatles were out, the Rolling Stones were out. We missed out. They all went to Amsterdam, right? Netherlands. We missed out on all of that British iconic bands, all the Who and all these amazing bands. They all relocated their catalogs to the Netherlands, and ever since, the Netherlands has been getting those that tax income from some of the best iconic British bands because of those taxes.
But see, this is insane because look,
I love it. It's like they're getting so animated now because it's like it's actually like rubber meets the road. Because again, I'm like, you know, I think like both of these guys, both Constantine and Francis, are inherently like they're liberals. They're okay with like, you know, they're okay with taxes. They're fine with it. They're not principally opposed to it. They're like, yeah, you know what, it's good as long as it got spent. Okay, I'm fine with getting taxed out the ass. I have no problem with it, right? But now that it's like rubber meets the road, like, hey, here are some real world examples that are like very obviously applicable or like, you know, that apply to them specifically. Now they're like freaking out. Now they're like, there's no way this can't happen. And it's like, baby boy, is happening.
It's a high income and you take a significant chunk of that. I think there's a perfectly legitimate argument in a country with really people won't feel like it's the truth now, but historically, geographically, comparatively speaking, good infrastructure, relatively good public services, all of that, right? That's all right. But when you're taxing people on money they don't even have for things that you've imagined in your head that are worth something that you've made up, that's fucking insane.
Yeah, so crazy.
And you and at that point, you no longer are being reasonable.
That's
at that
your
point,
wealth
you
tax.
are just literally driving people. Because for us, you see, people think that like rich people are greedy. But in the example you're giving, it's not about greedy, it's about survival. It's
just unworkable.
And once people either can survive or not, they will leave.
Yeah, you're not going to get you are not going to get investors who buy into that system. They don't want to hold British stock if they're investors. Right. Do you know what actually ends up happening? What ends up happening is the value of assets crash in the country that has wealth taxes, and foreign investors who are not subject to wealth taxes come in and buy
up
through
everything.
their private equity firms. So what you end up with is you have a crashing economy, and then BlackRock comes in and says, oh, we'll take those farms. We'll take, like, look what's happening to the farms. The farms are having to be sold really cheap. I'll tell you what's happening to the UK farms.
That is true.
They're
That is
buying
completely
up bits
happening.
of farmland and sticking solar panels on it. And because the economic model of sticking solar panels justifies a higher price, a small sale of farmland to put solar panels on it falsely inflates the value of these farms. Right? So all these farms around where they're just simply using it as an underpinning of the farm work, these farms are now worth not 3 million or 6 million, now they're worth 9 million. And these farmers, when they die, they have death taxes on 9 million, which is based upon, down the road, this farm sold for this amount of money per hectare, but it's sold based on solar panels, right? Now, these guys aren't doing solar panels. But guess what? They have to sell the farm to pay the death taxes. And who buys it? BlackRock. BlackRock comes in, and BlackRock has a $1.4 billion, I think, farm fund for British farmland. All of these assets get bought up by private equity firms, big foreign private equity firms, Norway, Qatar, buying up London. Why? Because the value of the assets crash based on terrible policy, and it's not British people who end up buying those assets, it's foreign private equity firms.
You know, and this goes back really to the start of our conversation, whereby
tax the rich,
if you
tax the wealth,
disincentivize people from
tax
being
the rich.
entrepreneurial to set up their own company.
Come on,
The
Gary.
single biggest thing I would say that has changed my life is myself and Constantine starting this business. It changed my mindset when it came to money. It changed my politics, to be honest with you.
I bet it
He
did.
started out on the right, and he's moved further right.
Does he
No, but you used to be like old school lefty.
Yeah, old school lefty. And the more because when you realize, when you run a business and you work in a business and you grow a business, suddenly you connect with reality in its most brutal, unpleasant way at times.
Yeah,
Because with the nature of running a business, you know this better than anyone. You're the last person to get paid.
Yes. Yeah.
You all get paid before us.
Everyone else
Wipe
gets
that
paid.
look off your
Yup.
face, Jack. Right? So,
But you know, we joke around, right? Trigonometry, just for people who are wondering, we started in April 2018 until 2020. So for 2 years, we put our own money into and never took a penny out.
Yeah.
And in 2020, for the first time, we paid ourselves a salary, which was £1,000 a month.
I've been there, yeah.
And that was the case for quite a while.
I've had multiple businesses where I'm the lowest paid person on the team,
right?
Building the business, making sure that everyone gets paid other than myself, taking risks. And I've had many months where if we didn't make those last few sales on Thursday afternoon before payroll, we were in serious trouble.
And you're taking that risk because you hope that at the end of it there is some kind of genuine reward. But carry on, mate. So you've become more lightweight. What else?
But there's a very important point underneath all that. So I now have a far greater appreciation of money. I have a far better understanding of how money is made, how money is created. And by doing that, that changes the way I interact with the world. But when I was a teacher, I didn't know any of those things. So the idea of just taxing the rich
sounds totally reasonable. Yeah,
it's totally reasonable because you don't understand. And I guess what I'm saying is, when you disempower people from going out, starting their own business, pursuing their own dreams, what happens is they get disconnected from the way that money is made, money is created. So these ideas, which I now understand are bad and will make people poorer, sound better.
They sound good, but then they don't work. They shut off the engine room of the economy. You raise an important point that education is really important. That if you don't educate people about how the system works, then they fall for smart sounding things or sensible sounding things.
Yep. I mean, look, dude, I mean, this is what I was saying earlier, which is there's a reason why Gary's economics is what? Let's say 200 times as big? 200 times? 2,000 times as big? Something like that? 6,000 times as big? As 6,000 times as big? I think that's actually accurate. Yeah, 1.4 million. This guy's got 20,000 subscribers. Gary Stevenson has 1.4, 1.6. So like thousands of times, hundreds of times. I can't do math off the top of my head in this scenario. But let me think. 100, 100. It's like 600 times bigger than this guy. There's a reason why. He doesn't have better ideas. He's got a better sounding message that resonates with more people emotionally.
You know, Gary's economics comes along and says, "Oh, just do a 2% income tax." You know, I spoke to Gary's economics. I was shocked that he doesn't distinguish at all between revenue, profit, wealth. He doesn't distinguish between houses and business equity.
Oh my God, dude!
He just got a very simple sounding soundbite. I'm actually shocked that he's LSE and Oxford educated, and he literally just goes with these super soundbites, and then when challenged on it, gets angry. But what happens is that you get vast numbers of the population.
We're gonna have to watch.
Basically, fall for this stuff.
But
we're gonna absolutely have to watch.
This will sound unpleasant to people, but
I really am gonna have to watch that Diary of a CEO thing between him and Gary Stevenson, because I want to see if it actually is as much of a, I don't want to say blowout. You gonna stream for a bit now? Okay, cool. Good luck. We're probably gonna be wrapping up relatively soon, actually. And if I know how to raid, I'll raid into your stream, actually.
I also just think it's true, so we should say it because it's important. It's easier to think that way. And it's comforting to think that way because you go, well, it's not my fault. It's the system. It's the rich. It's the this. It's the that. You had that same opportunity.
I don't know about that. I push back on that because it's very disempowering. You hand over all your agency when you think that way, and it's a horrible feeling.
Yes, but imagine, see, you can't understand it because you don't think like this. Imagine that you had to face the fact that you have all that agency and you haven't done anything with it. Then it's much more comforting to think that it's not your fault, it's someone else's fault, right? That you haven't got to where ideally you would have liked to get. Because, see, even in Britain, where everyone thinks being rich and wealthy is a terrible thing, and it's, you know, you're disgusting if you want to do well and all the rest of it, people still want to make money. People still want to do well. People still want a nice house.
I really want to make sure your listeners know this is the moment in time where you can go from 0 to $1 million in it happens fast now.
It
we
does.
regularly get our clients launch and get $1 million of revenue in their first 12 months. Like this is not a hard thing to do. It's often the case because we have access to global markets, lightning fast technology. It's often the case that if you want to turn it around, let's say you're in your 50s and you go, oh, I've discovered I've got all this agency and I've done nothing with it. Great, 2.5 years from now, build yourself a serious business.
Yeah.
You really can turn it around fast if you switch your mindset on and you go, actually, you know what? I want to do things differently. This is not like it used to be that you had to spend your entire life building something of value. Things can become, especially in AI-powered world, which is going to further polarize people. There are people who can start with nothing and make 7-figure revenue in their first 12 to 18 months. It does happen all the time.
And think about how much information is available, including your work and loads of other people, in a way that even Francis and I never really had access to. If you're interested in doing something now, the world of information is all there.
Well, ChatGPT is literally an advisor that knows everything, and you can just talk to ChatGPT.
Wow, yeah, but they're not necessarily.
Say, oh, how do I set up this? How do I do this? How do I make this happen? Help me create a marketing campaign. Help me. You can literally say.
One thing I will say about the AI stuff is I don't like ChatGPT. It takes a little bit too much of my data, I think.
Ask me questions and help me come up with a business idea. Like it's wild, you know.
Yeah, I was going to say, you know, I always remember this moment during the pandemic when everything locked down and had a kind of bleak moment. And I spoke to Andrew about this, the comedian Andrew Schultz, and I saw a video of his where he just did a little direct address to the camera, and this actually changed my life, where he went, "You've always complained that you've never had time. You've never had time to write the book, write the movie script, start a podcast, start a business, follow your dreams. Well, now you have time. So what are you going to do with it?" And not to say, look, people have kids and whatever else. No, it's not everybody has the same opportunity. But that reframe of a situation was so powerful for me. And I think, and I really want people to take this away from this conversation is, like, you've got more power than you would admit to yourself.
Our ancestors, your grandparents, great-grandparents, they would trade places with you in a heartbeat. I mean, if they could see what's available, if they were sitting on the sidelines and saying, oh my goodness, you mean you can start a YouTube channel and you don't even ask any permission, you just start it? Oh, you mean you can just set up a Shopify store? You mean you can just go connect with people on Instagram? You can just use ChatGPT and like get every answer to every question and it like literally customized, tailored to your circumstances? You can do all that?
Yeah, you can do all that.
Man, oh man, like tap out, let me in, right? Like, most people are sitting there going, oh, but I've got tennis elbow. It's like, oh, come on, let's hit it.
Yeah, I will take credit for this. We have inspired a lot of people to start things similar to what we do because they're just like, well, if those two idiots can do it, we definitely can. And that genuinely is true. There are a lot of people like that. But I think you're totally right. And that is always worth remembering because ultimately, like you say, you can only play the cards that you've been dealt.
Life's not fair.
No.
Life is not fair. And you know what? That's just how it is. And this idea that we're going to wait until there's some sort of fair scenario, you'll be waiting the rest of your life. You'll be waiting forever. You know, it's not fair that my friend, quadruple amputee, just totally unfair. Another friend of mine, he was riding his bike as sun was going down, a drunk driver hits him. He's in a coma for 6 weeks. He almost just lives. But he destroys his entire, everything in his life was completely destroyed as a result of a drunk driver. As soon as he can, he's up, he's starting a business, he's now living in Thailand, he's running his global business from Thailand and Dubai. He's basically like, cool. I'm glad I got a second chance at life and I'm ready to go again. So totally not fair, gets on with it.
Daniel, before we head over to Substack and we ask your people's questions to you, what's the one thing we're not talking about that we should be?
We must change the schooling system. We are now living in a world where we're training people for an industrial revolution system that doesn't exist.
Holy crap,
that schooling system was designed to create cogs in machines.
Oh, yeah.
We don't need cogs in machines anymore. It was designed to basically fill up local factories and local offices.
It's not even that. It's literally like, hey, this was used in the system was originally formulated for Prussian school system, and it was basically made to make, yes, industrial revolution, cogs in a machine in a factory, but also more so soldiers that would just go out and obey orders mindlessly in Prussian legions. That was like, a large portion of why it was the way that it is, that it's so like dehumanizing, and it's so just completely, just obey the person up there. That's why it's factory farming people.
Offices with people who were component labor. That system is not going to serve us. We are already living in a post-AI world, and all of the jobs that the schooling system is preparing us for, they will not exist. They're going away, or they're going to go mostly away. We have to prepare children for the world that is coming, and it's coming in thick and fast. We've urgently got to be changing the schooling system and preparing kids for the world that's coming.
Completely agree with you. There's someone. There were times when I was teaching, I'm like, I have no idea. Well, we're teaching kids about how to use a compass, for example. And that was recent as 2020. But I don't teach kids about what APR means on a credit card.
Don't worry, if the world keeps going the way his compasses are going to become useful again. Anyway, he used to be a teacher. All right, heading over to Substack. Where we're
All right. That's pretty good. All right, does anybody in chat know how to raid? I said I would get over into Minty Minku Plays. I don't know how to do it. Let me see here. I don't know how to do it. 76 subscribers. I don't know what the buttons are. I knew them on Twitch. I don't know what they are here. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to look it up. Next time, yeah. If this person is going to stream, check them out. I don't know how to do it, though. All right, with that being said, thank you very much for your time and attention. Good luck in all your endeavors. I'll say farewell.